Let's open with the Mangala Shloka. In fact, let's do a prayer to Mother Kali and then we'll open with the Mangala Shloka, meaning the prayer for auspiciousness for our text, the Paramartha Sara. Om Grihana Vandanam Mata Sada Vijaya Vardhini Pada Padmam Sada Vande Sthanam Dehi Padambuje. Oh Mother, please accept my prayer. You are always victorious and you always have your way. Grihana Vandanam Devi. Grihana Vandana Mata Sada Vijaya Vardhana Pada Padmam Sada Vande. I'm always praying to your lotus feet. Pada Padmam Sada Vande. Keep me forever at thy lotus feet. Sthanam Dehi Padambuje. Keep me forever here. Om Shrimat Sura Sura Radhya Charanamburu Hadvayam Charachara Jagadhatrim Kalikam Pranamamyam. I bow to that Kali, I prostrate before that Kali, who is the Jagadhatri, the holder of the entire universe. She is that supreme reality, the auspicious one, worshipped by both gods and demons. Shrimat Sura Asura Radhyam Charanam Burhadvayam. I praise that goddess who is present in the Charachara, in the moving and unmoving. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shubho Amavasya. And notice how similar that invocation to Kali, prayer to Kali is to this Mangala Shloka, especially with the idea of Jagadhatri, the goddess who holds within herself the entire universe. And think of how this correlates to the word Jagad Ananda in the Malini Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra. So the bliss of the universe is the universe, the fullness of Kali. And so now let's chant the Mangala Shloka of our text and see there's a very similar kind of bhava where we're saying Mother is transcendent. She is para, she is beyond this wheel of transmigratory existence, and yet she's wholly immanent, wholly present within it, in all things, as all things. So she's the ground of reality as well as that which is beyond this manifest material reality. So this is the Mangala Shloka from Abhinava Gupta in Paramartha Sara. Param parastham gahanadanadim ekam nivishtam bahudagu asu sarvalayam sarvacharacharastham tvameva shambhu sharanam prapadye tvameva shambhu sharanam prapadye. I take refuge in you alone, O Shambhu, my Guru. You are none other than Shiva, who is none other than Para, the supreme goddess. She is established in the transcendent reality, Para Parastam Gahanad, beyond this abyss or forest of transmigratory existence. She is Ekam, non-dual. She is Nityam, eternal, beginningless and endless, Anadim. She is that reality who is the refuge of all, who is the ground of all being, who is wholly immanent in the moving and unmoving. May this be an offering at her lotus feet. Om Sahasravaranaye Paraye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So today is a very, very special day. It's the Amavasya. So it's the end of Shravana Mas and the beginning of Bhadrapada. And today is the new moon, so it's the first day of the rest of our lives. May this be a singularity in everyone's spirituality. And sometimes I think spiritual life is really just about getting good at starting over. You know, like every single moment should have this freshness. And yesterday we looked at the Pancha Brahma mantras and we saw that the first of those, Sadhyo Jatam Prapadyami, we're praying to Sadhyo Jata. And the word Sadhya, Ujata, Sadhya, Udaya means to arise, or Udgama, or Jata means to be born, like that. So this Sad Udya Jayata, meaning like Sadhyo Jayata, means that which is always born again and again, who is ever new in his birth. Sadhyo Jata. So that idea of Shiva being born again and again and again is so important. And when we think of Bhairava, the important thing about Bhairava is that his eyes are wide open. Usually when we think of Shiva, when he's depicted artistically, he's seated in meditation posture, and sometimes his eyes are open, so he can like listen to the prayers of devotees. Obviously that's very theologically important, that we pray to a God that we feel is listening to us. So a lot of artists, of course, will account for that and make sure his eyes are somewhat open. But often they're closed or they're half closed. They're half closed in ecstasy. And so you sense that he's not really quite all the way here. He's absorbed inward. And this would happen to Sri Ramakrishna quite often. People would be talking to him and the sun would suddenly set. And that time something came over him. When the sun would set, he would suddenly become abstracted, indrawn. And he would kind of mumble words. He would slur. He would act like a drunk, but he would be kind of absorbed in his own mood. So people weren't really able to access him at that point in an exoteric way. But they sat there anyway. Like they just sat and they felt something emanating from him. So When M first saw this at the beginning of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna in the Katamrita, he describes it as like a fisherman who is kind of focusing a little bit on the what do you call it, the rod, and waiting for the string to tremble or tremor because the fish has taken the bait. And so he's very focused on that. And so he's not really paying attention to everything around him, though he's somewhat still there, you know. So he said it's like an angler or a fisherman like that. He seemed to be probing his own inner depths, as it were. So this bhava, sometimes we call it Shambhavi Mudra or Bhairavi Mudra, where one is absorbed wholly inwardly and yet eyes are still open and still somewhat available. We see that depicted in Shiva quite a bit. So when Shiva is sitting there in meditation, his eyes are half closed in ecstasy. He's absorbed in himself in meditation. And so too with Abhinavagupta. There's that beautiful meditation mantra that Madhuraja, a South Indian tantric master, composed for Abhinavagupta. It's a pen portrait of his guru. And there we see Abhinavagupta is seated in the Virasana, hero's posture. He's absent-mindedly sort of playing with his left hand a veena. He's playing a lute, an Indian stringed instrument, with his left hand. And in his right hand, he's holding a japa mala, a rosary, and he's thumbing the rosary and saying his mantra. But importantly, his eyes are described as half closed, and not just half closed, fluttering in ecstasy. So he's playing music, he's chanting a mantra, he's absorbed in his own reality, and he's in bliss, he's in ecstasy. But at the same time, he's giving a teaching. And at the foot of the dais upon which Abhinavagupta is seated on cushions, and by the way, it's maximally beautiful. Like the dais is strung with pearls. So there are beautiful pearls all over. And above Abhinavagupta are these like cloths, many colored cloths. He's wearing white clothes, bright as moonbeams. His neck is smeared with some kind of fragrant paste, like sandalwood and other herbs from that region. He's wearing a one single Rudraksh earring, you know. His hair is long, black, jet black hair, but it's held back with jasmine flowers, a string of jasmine flowers. So you can imagine how fragrant the pastes on his neck are, how fragrant the jasmine flowers are, and of course how beautiful and texturally rich the cloth and the dais and the awning all must be. And of course it's described that there's ghee and various other oils burning in the room, and various incense burning in the room, and all of this is taking place in a vineyard. And there are two dutis, two consorts holding jugs of wine. So the whole thing smacks of beauty and ecstasy and maximal aesthetic delight. But importantly, he's absorbed inwardly in meditation. He's not externally or extrovertedly available, really. He's like inwardly absorbed. And he's giving a teaching. And at the foot of this dais is Kshemaraja, one of the most prolific students Abhinavagupta ever had. And so Kshemaraja is there dutifully recording everything the master is saying. So he's in activity, he's in action, he's teaching, he's playing music, he's performing rituals like japa at the very least, but he's absorbed inwardly. So when we look at Sri Ramakrishna, when we look at Shiva, when we look at Abhinavagupta, there's always this stress on inwardness. When we look at Bhairava, one thing that's quite telling about Bhairava is his eyes are not closed, nor are they even half closed. Almost always his eyes are wide open and unblinking. One has in mind the image of Jagannath at Puri, who, by the way, was worshipped as Bhairava and is worshipped as Bhairava, because that too is a Shakta Pita where Vimala Devī resides. So when you look at that image of Jagannath, or if you look at any image of Bhairava in South India, and particularly in Tibet, because Tibet, they have this like kind of Bhairava head sort of iconography. In South India, we usually have this like slim, tall, like he's behind me there, you can't quite see him, but he looks like that in South India. That's a South Indian Bhairava behind me. But in Tibet, in Nepal, especially in Nepal, it's just a head, like Jagannath. And it's super fanged, and like his eyes are wide open like that. So barely any eyelids, you know, eyes are wide open. And the important thing here is because it's Sadhya Ujjata, it's Udgama, like Nityodita. I think that's the best Sanskrit word for it. Udita means to arise. Udita is like Udgama. And Nitya means eternally. So Nitya Udita means, Nityodita means eternally arising. So Sadhyo Jatam Prapadyami. I take refuge in that ever new Shiva, the Shiva who is always born. Bhairava is continually encountering his own self, and in each and every moment he recognizes himself anew. So he's having a new experience of the same reality again and again and again. So this is called Nitya Udita. It's a bliss, it's a joy that is always fresh, though it's always the same. That's the paradox of it. When we realize the absolute, we only ever see the absolute. We don't see anything other than the absolute. After all, we recognize that only the absolute is. But having recognized that, what's really interesting about it is that it never gets old, because even though I know it's the same thing that I'm seeing again and again and again, it is the inherent nature of that thing which is really a no thing, to continually appear in new forms. So it's almost like, imagine there's a set number of colors, right? And there aren't any colors outside of these colors. Let's say, just for fun, let's say there are only 7 colors, just for fun. And that is the total number of colors available. And just for this thought experiment, imagine that there is no way to mix those colors even. Just for fun, just imagine you couldn't really mix blue and yellow and get green. The colors are discrete. But even with 7 colors, imagine how infinite your expression could be. Do you know, like, you could combine those colors in so many different ways. You don't even have to mix them. You could just use them and paint so many different pictures. And now imagine how much more that would be the case if you could actually mix those colors. So similarly, there's only one reality, but that reality has the power to like configure itself and appear in ever new configurations again and again and again. So Bhairava, his eyes are wide open because he's always encountering himself again and again and again. So spiritual life, at the very least, is about this kind of sense of nitya udita, or about ever newness or ever freshness. And each moment we should feel like a child, you know, like we're just getting started. Like everything we learn, notice the more we learn, the more we realize we have to learn, or the more we realize we didn't know. We think we understand something philosophically, or we think we know how to do a practice. But then when we actually start digging into it, when we start looking under the hood, as it were, we realize it's much more complex than we could ever have imagined. And also simpler than we could ever have imagined. And we realize, oh my God, how meager is my understanding. I thought I knew, but then the more I look at something, the less I think I know, you know, and that idea, there's always something new to learn, will bring this feeling of like the beginner's mindset. We always feel Zen mind, beginner's mind, that kind of thing. We always feel like a student, and we always feel like this is the first day of our spiritual life. Like we're just getting started, and therefore the honeymoon period never wanes. And for this, to keep up this bhava of newness, we should be doing new things. Now, obviously, our practice should be consistent. Our practice is the same day in, day out. That's how we go deep in our practice. If we do so many different practices, chances are we won't really go deep in any of them. And it's true. The moment a practice starts flowering, the moment it starts to work, there's a natural aversion to it. Like when it starts transforming us, we who don't want to be transformed really, we jump to a new practice. You know, so when the practice is actually dislodging the ego, when it's actually like exploding thought constructs and dissolving vikalpas, that's when it starts to become uncomfortable, and that's when we're less likely to do it. So therefore, the guru's job is to make sure you stick to the same practice. Say the same mantra, do the same rituals, like day in, day out, clock in and clock out like you would your job, you know, and that's the kind of work that we have to put in. And if the guru is not there to hold you to that, and if you don't have the discipline to stay the course, then very naturally the mind is going to draw you into a different practice, and then no practice will really do its job. You know, so you'll be flitting from one tradition to another, one practice to another, like that. So practice generally stays the same. What we do every day generally stays the same. But then where do you get the freshness? How do you keep spirituality alive? We would argue, let's be very conservative in terms of practice, but exceedingly liberal in terms of study. So that's where the freshness can come. So when we take in new texts, you know, like for instance, we're studying the Paramarthasara today, and last night we were studying the Vijnana Bhairava. When we study various texts in the tradition, like the Ashtavakara Gita, for instance, or the Avadhuta Gita, those are remarkable non-dual masterpiece type texts. You could study a Tantra, like the Malini Vijayotara Tantra, or you could study any of Abhinavagupta's works, like the one we're studying today, or Tantra Sara, or Tantra Loka, or something like that. You'll notice that they're all saying the same thing. All these books are reminding you of that same reality, but importantly, they're all saying it in slightly different ways or pointing to it in slightly different ways. So that keeps everything fresh. So when we study the Paramarthasara, you'll see that these are ideas that you probably have already encountered in different texts, or that you have already intuited as part of your journey so far. And yet, being told them, being presented them again in a new way, in new words, is thrilling, is exciting. So what we're going to do today, we're going to study the Paramarthasara, but this is a kind of sadhana. So as we walk through these various verses and as we think through them, we're doing what Abhinavagupta calls vikalpa samskara, which means purifying one's thought constructs. Vikalpa means thought constructs, and yesterday we learned something so beautiful from the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra. We learned that the absolute nature of reality is that gochara, that field, which is free of all limiting thought constructs. It is a reality beyond the mind, devoid of conceptual information. But we also learned that it is the ananda, the bliss of one's own swa anubhuti, one's own experience. So the bliss of your own inner experiencing, that is Bhairava, not any particular form. Bhairava is that bharitakara, the state of fullness and plenitude, which is your innate being, which is essentially actually a field free of all thought constructs. So we know that Bhairava, the ultimate nature of reality, which is inseparable from Shakti, is just consciousness. And that consciousness is full in and of itself. It is a field free of all thought constructs. And yet, thought constructs can be very helpful in getting there. So like that's why we say there are two kinds of thought constructs. And Abhinavagupta gives us this terminology, Shuddha Vikalpa and Ashuddha Vikalpa. An Ashuddha Vikalpa is any thought construct which is taking you into more conceptual thinking. So most of our thought constructs are like that. They create more thought constructs, and then we never appreciate the plenitude, the fullness of that consciousness beyond all thought constructs because we're lost in the sauce. We're thinking about time and space and all the things that exist within time and space, and so we're just too busy, too distracted, as it were, to recognize our own innate fullness. So the goal is to go beyond all thought constructs. But how will you do that? The mind is inclined to think. The intellect needs to intellectualize. The cognitive faculty needs to cogitate. And if you just say, stop doing that, it'll be repressive. It'll be like forcing your mind to do something that's not natural. Telling the mind, which likes to think, not to think is violent. And so a lot of yogis, they sit there and they just force their mind into stillness. They bludgeon the mind into stillness. They don't like that the mind is thinking. They recognize that thinking is a problem. And so they write books demonizing thinking. And then they sit down, and after judging everyone else for thinking, they then sit down and bludgeon their own minds and judge themselves for thinking and try to stun their minds into silence. I think it would be better if you just Harry Potter style ran up against a wall, If this is what you want to do, if you want to commit this kind of spiritual suicide, if you just want to like kill your mind, then I think there are quicker ways to enter that concussion than yoga practice. So that's what yoga practice ultimately amounts to, a very repressive, very violent, and very aggressive attempt to still the mind, based on a very sincere desire to escape the mind, of course. We say that's not very skillful. I mean, it's fine if it floats your boat, but surely there is a sweeter way, a gentler way, a way that flows naturally with the currents of the mind, a way that doesn't repress or suppress. So we say, let the mind think. It's perfectly fine to think. It's a form of energy, and energy should flow. And like we were saying last week or on Wednesday, actually not last week, earlier this week, dis-ease, a feeling of disease, is nothing but energy flowing and getting checked or limited. So any impediment to the flow of energy, to the free flow of energy, will be felt as disease. And we're mentally diseased because of all our hang-ups and all of our preconditions, and so our energies don't flow freely and smoothly and cleanly. So the energies of the mind must flow. Let them flow. But we say let them flow towards God. So we see what Sri Ramakrishna says in response to Hari Maharaj. Swami Turiyanandaji, when he was young, felt like he had to overcome lust. I mean, he was reading in the various texts that lust and greed are great obstacles. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says there are 3 gates to hell, right? Like kama, desire or lust, krodha, anger, lobha, greed. So lust, anger, greed, or lust, greed, anger, these are all the ways to misery, if you will. So these are problems, right? So of course, Hari Maharaj, having encountered literature like this, wants to overcome these problems. So he goes to Sri Ramakrishna and he says, how do I overcome lust? Famous story. Sri Ramakrishna, first of all, scolds him because in one sense he was being kind of antagonistic towards women. Like Hari Maharaj expressed that the problem was that he was a heterosexual man and that there are women in this world who are temptresses, and like Sri Ramakrishna was livid with that idea. He was like, first of all, how dare you blame someone else for your own quote-unquote problem, which by the way he doesn't think is a problem. But secondly, like, women are the goddess, and the divine mother herself is incarnate as every woman. So you can't in the same breath worship the goddess, or you cannot in the same breath practice spirituality if you don't revere women, who are the symbols of the divine mother in this universe. So unless you worship women, what to say of worshipping Kali? Like, unless you worship women, you can't access spirituality in this way, at least. And I would argue in every way. But another thing here is very interesting, is that the next thing that Sri Ramakrishna scolds him for is this idea that he has to overcome lust. He's like, how do I overcome lust? And Sri Ramakrishna's like, why would you want to do that? Like that idea of overcoming lust was preposterous to Sri Ramakrishna. It's an energy. An energy that flows, if it's checked, if it's impeded, will then become, it will stagnate, or it will turn against you. And so Sri Ramakrishna gave a very interesting suggestion. He said, don't overcome lust. Increase your lust. I mean, that's really strange advice to get from any spiritual teacher whatsoever, because we can see the ways in which anger, greed, lust, jealousy, all of that, we see the ways in which these psychic forces wreak havoc in our lives. And now a spiritual teacher is saying, no, it's not only is it not a problem, but actually you should pray for it to increase. You should increase. What the fuck does that even mean? What does it mean to increase your lust? But he's saying increase the energy that's flowing through your body. And that's the thing, when a lot of people come to spiritual life and they start doing practices, they realize that it's like bringing in energy, but the energy doesn't just energize the quote unquote good parts in their psyche. It also energizes all the darkness in the psyche. So if you bring in a bunch of food into the energy body, it's not just your devas that will eat. It is also your asuras that will eat. And if you are stuck in this idea of devas versus asuras, good versus bad, this whole thing will be very disconcerting for you. Because as you do more spiritual practice, you seem to be getting hornier, angrier, greedier. And then you're like, oh my God, this is the opposite of what I hope to happen. Because in truth, maybe what you were hoping to happen is, like we were saying on Monday, some state of good without bad, or some state of peaceful without restless rage, or something like that. So Sri Ramakrishna is saying, yeah, increase your lust, and by that he might mean do spiritual practices and trust that through sadhana you'll get more energy, which will naturally energize all those things that you want to get rid of. Then he says something even crazier. He says, why would you want to overcome your lust? Increase your lust and redirect it towards God. Channel it towards God. Send it towards God. And in many other places, Sri Ramakrishna would say, if you must be angry at God for not showing himself or herself. If you must be horny, or if you must be aroused, then desire intercourse with God. If you must be proud to be God's child. Basically, these are all energies that should be harnessed and directed for your spiritual ends. And in another place, to M, Sri Ramakrishna said, if you can love God with the combined attraction of the wife's love for her husband, the rich man's love for his money, and the mother's love for its child, then you will certainly attain God. So basically, all of these things that are natural to you, like as a mother, it's natural to love a child. As a child, it's natural to love a mother. As a rich person, it's natural to love your money. I mean, your identity is more often than not tied to your bank balance. So it's perfectly natural and fine. That's just natural. Why should it be bad that you like money or that you want more money? Why should it be bad that a mother loves her child or that the child loves her mother? And why should it be bad that a partner is attracted sexually and romantically and emotionally and spiritually to her partner? Or partners even. It doesn't really matter what the attraction is, what the energy is. It's holy and natural. Now, it's not the energy that we have to overcome, it's the direction, as it were. We have to skillfully navigate that energy. So what Sri Ramakrishna is offering here is a way to use what other traditions would call as a would label as a problem, here as an opportunity. Hey Julie, I missed you so much. It's been like infinite years since I've seen you. Dharma Julie, good to see you, man. Julie. But so what's then the solution for the thinking mind? We've already identified that the thinking mind can be a problem insofar as it generates vikalpas that will differentiate the non-different reality. So the solution we get from this tradition and from Abhinavagupta is the same. Don't violently oppress the mind. So don't violently repress the mind. Don't just bludgeon it into silence. Instead, what we should do is use the mind, redirect the mind towards God. So if the mind must think, we do this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to think through some really, really subtle concepts. And we encountered them yesterday together, actually. We didn't really have time to comment on them properly last night. And I will do so again. We'll do this again probably next week on the Thursday evening class. So we'll maybe get 2 opportunities. And if you put it behind this thing, so the fan can go behind, just so the computer doesn't, remember yesterday it was lagging because it was so hot. Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Okay, you just pass me that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. The house is, in the summer, the house gets really hot and the computer then protests. It's like, I refuse to work in these conditions, and then it starts to lag. Thank you, dear. Did it. Okay. Okay, there we go. Done. Right? Anyway, so we're going to present some really subtle ideas today. I think they are some of the most advanced concepts in the Tantric tradition, very difficult to understand because, in one sense, they play upon linguistic mysticism a lot. And so a little bit of familiarity with the Sanskrit phonemes is important, like through to ha, e, u, like that. But not only that, some familiarity with Sankhya, with yoga, and specifically with more obscure philosophies that are very important, like Shabda Brahmavada. So some familiarity with Panini's Ashtadhyayi, as well as with Vakyapadiya by Bhatrahari. These are kind of things that were popular at that time, that these philosophers and these students were aware of and that had studied. And now at this time, we don't really have access, often, most of us, to the Vakyapadiya or Panini's Ashtadhyayi, so some of this stuff seems new and seems exotic because we don't really encounter it. So we have to accept that these are difficult philosophies because some of the background knowledge required to interact with these ideas is, for the most part, a lacuna in the modern yoga understanding. So these are refined ideas, and the Vijnana Bhairava offers them one by one in the beginning of the text. So the first 23 verses explore these very profound ideas, and I think that's what I want to do today. I want to look at the Paramarthasara and see how in the Paramarthasara we are given tools actually to understand the very technical and esoteric language that Devī, that Bhairavi uses in the first 23 verses of the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. So next week we'll do this more fully. We'll explore these concepts a little more. And next week, I guess we'll call the talk Advanced Concepts in Tantra or something like that. Today's talk, of course, is about the Paramarthasara, but I want to look at the ninefold Bhairava, the three-headed Bhairava, the triad of powers, and Matrika Chakra and the Shabda Rashi. So these are 5 concepts I want to explore with you today. Those 5 concepts are all brought up in the beginning of the Vijnana Bhairava. And oh my God, Nitya Leela Devi, you're right. I forgot to mention. So next week, you guys, you're all invited. But August 27th through to August 31st, we're having our Colorado retreat. Now, it's very likely that we'll probably still do the Zoom. Like, it's very likely that I will just have like a hybrid thing with the Zoom screen on and with the people in the room all together just having this class. That might be a cool thing to do. But to be determined, okay? But yeah, so next week I don't think we'll be able to have our Wednesday class since I'm flying out earlier in the day. So we won't have our Hatha Yoga class on Wednesday. Likely we will have our Thursday evening class, probably. And Kuleshwari, it's her birthday that day. So I think she would want to teach. Knowing Kuleshwari, I think on her birthday she will be inspired to teach. I don't know, I'll have to check in with her. But I think she will want to teach some Hatha Yoga. And then if she's gonna offer Hatha Yoga, I might as well just teach the 6:30 and 7:30 classes. So maybe Thursday evening we'll continue. And Friday morning at least we'll do this class. My feeling is that we'll do this class. And then evening we probably won't have any classes. But yeah. So insofar as we do have a class next week, if we do, then it'll probably be called something like Advanced Tantric Concepts, and we'll look at these ideas again, but with more detail. Today I just want to take a first pass at them. But mainly I want to use the Paramarthasara as a guide, as like a tool to help us understand some of these technical terms. So remember the ninefold Bhairava or Navatma Bhairava, the Bhairava with the 9 selves. What does it mean for Bhairava to have 9 selves? That's an important idea we can explore. And of course, you can see, you can approach this from a Sri Vidya point of view. You can think about the 9 avaranas. You know, there are 9 levels to the Sri Chakra, and from tradition to tradition, there are different ways to like arrange these avaranas according to the chakras. Now, you know, the chakra system is super varied. Like there are 6 chakra systems, there are 5 chakra systems. The primordial chakra system might be a 3 chakra system or a 2 chakra system or an eka chakra system. The word chakra just means wheel, and it means a dynamic movement of energy. So how many of these are there in the body? Actually infinite. The body itself is a single chakra. It's an eka chakra. In the body is a circuit of energies flowing. So there's one chakra called the body, whereas within that body, within that chakra, there are infinite whirlpools and eddies of energy flowing. So there's no way to say there are this many chakras only. There are infinite chakras and there are no chakras at all. But insofar as we want to talk about chakras, there are 6, 5, 7, 3, and of course 12 in the Vijnana Bhairava. But some traditions actually use 9. They have a 9 chakra model. And you can see that might be influenced by Sri Vidya, or Sri Vidya might be influenced by it. So you can think of there being 9 chakras, 9 avaranas in the Sri Chakra, and then you can think of Bhairava having 9 selves as all having something to do with one another. Do you know? And then it's important that in the Stotravali, the Shiva Stotravali of not Somananda, sorry, of Utpaladeva, there's this beautiful verse at the very end. It's actually one of my favorite verses in the literature, and it's like kind of in my back pocket because should anybody ever ask, or should mother ever ask me what I want, this is the verse that I pull out because this is what I want, and this is what Utpaladeva wanted. And this is what Sri Ramakrishna wanted. It's the final prayer of the Shiva Sutravali. Utpaladeva says, "Oh Shiva." And by the way, this is a great non-dual master. So he's already realized that all things are Shiva and that he is Shiva and that only one reality exists, etc., etc. But having realized Advaita, his final prayer has a dualistic flavor. It's a sweet prayer to his beloved Shiva, who is his Ishta Devata. He says, "Oh Shiva, I only ask for one thing." So he's only got one prayer and he says, "I only want to drink the liquor of thy devotion. And I want to chant thy name, dancing mad with joy in this cremation ground with my friends, the 9 ghosts." So who are the Navabhutas? Like what, why the number nine? I mean, aren't there infinite ghosts in the cremation ground? And by ghost, you can think he's referring to violent forces, dark forces, referring to other people and other beings, or just other devotees. Because you can think of the devotees of Shiva as being Bhutas and Ganas, all of those outcasts in society who become a little weird once they start worshipping Shiva because they go beyond all rules and conventions. So we hear the same prayer in Sri Ramakrishna. Whenever Sri Ramakrishna's mind would soar into samadhi, he would immediately, often almost immediately say, Mother, stop, stop, or something like that. You know, often he would say, I don't want to be a dry monk. Don't make me a dry monk, mother. I want to be Bhava Raja. I want to be a king of ecstatic moods. And he would say, I want to stay here so I can eat, interestingly, drink, and make merry. I want to sing and dance and enjoy the company of devotees. So the idea of like being embodied, celebrating, worshipping, engaging in the dynamic beauty of just loving and loving with others, loving together. Like that seemed to be what Sri Ramakrishna liked the most. Having realized Advaita, now he would enjoy Dvaita. He would enjoy oneness with God through worshipping God. You know, having realized the pujari or the pujarini and the puja, as well as puja itself, the worshipper, the worshipped, and the act of worshipping, having realized that in this trinity there is only a oneness, having realized that, no problem, he'll still continue worshipping. And so you see Utpala Deva is praying for this at the end of the Shiva Stotravali. Abhinavagupta lives this. His whole life is just hymns and whatnot. And Sri Ramakrishna, of course, prayed for this at the very end. And Utpala Deva has a beautiful book out. It's a very short book. One day we'll study it together, maybe, called Ishvara Siddhi, which means establishing God. It's basically a non-dual proof for God. But at the end of that book, he says something very beautiful. He says, even if Advaita is the truth, right? Like liken the truth to a burning brand, like he calls it Deepa Shalaka, which is firebrand, like a stick on fire. So let's say the truth is like this torch, the torch of wisdom. Now, where does the torch shine brightest? In the daytime or at night? And he says, in a dark room at night, the torch shines brightest. So even if you say Dvaita, duality, is like a dark room of ignorance, then Advaita, the non dual knowledge, is expressed best in the context of duality. You know, it's not that bright, it's not that beautiful in the bright daylight of jnana, but it's so beautiful in the quote unquote ajnana of this world of duality. Then Advaita can really shine, you know. So that's a beautiful metaphor, poetic kind of way of saying that one should sing and dance and enjoy one's life. But having realized God, that becomes truly possible. So, what are the nine ghosts? Because when you say Bhuta, you could say, okay, other devotees. I want to sing and dance and enjoy the company of other devotees chanting thy name. I want to drink the liquor of devotion. I want to be ecstatic. But Bhutas could also mean elements. So, nine elements. But I thought there were only five like that. And more importantly, Bhutas can refer to the nine apertures, the nine gates through which prana flows and into which prana comes. And we'll list those in just a few moments. It could refer to the nine chakras. It could refer to like maybe nine beings that he has in mind. Maybe there are like the eight Bhairavas plus one extra, which is the Bhairava in which the eight appear. So could he be talking about the Ashtamurtis, the eight Bhairavas, along with an extra reconciling principle? It's not quite clear what he means by the number nine, but he quite clearly says Navabhutas. So these nine ghosts that Utpaladeva brings up, the nine avaranas of the Sri Chakra, the nine chakras or the nine gates that we talk about in some more yogic anatomy circles, and of course the Navatma Bhairava, the ninefold Bhairava that we encounter in the beginning of the Vijnana Bhairava. What is that? And so let's talk about that. And Navarasa, yes, we're talking, Joelji also points out that there are Ashta rasas, and Abhinava Gupta adds the ninth rasa, Navarasa. So why the number nine, and what exactly do we mean when we say Navatma Bhairava? What does Devī mean when she says Navatma Bhairava? In one sense, we don't know. You know, we have to be honest, like there are probably references that are being made in the Vijnana Bhairava that are referring to texts that no longer exist or traditions that no longer exist. So there might have been a sense in which the word Navatma Bhairava is used that no longer makes sense now, but that might have had currency then. So we cannot be sure that our interpretations of this term are really what Devi meant. But I think the beauty of this kind of literature is that every term is multivalent. It means more than one thing. So we'll offer at least just a few understandings or a few concepts, a few vikalpas, if you will, to go along with this word Navatma Bhairava. Why does Bhairava have nine selves? Or why does he have nine forms or nine levels? And we're going to use Abhinava Gupta because in the Tantra Loka, Abhinava Gupta actually describes Navatma Bhairava and he tells us exactly what the nine things are. According to his exegesis, they're just levels of the 36 tattvas. So they are the 5 Kanchukas of Maya plus the other 5. But then like 2 are dropped. So Abhinavagupta does actually give us a list of 9, and he calls this the Navatma Bhairava, the Bhairava with 9 selves, if you will. So we're going to use Abhinavagupta's Tantra Loka, but you'll see that it's the Paramartha Sara actually that equips you with this idea of the 36 tattvas, which you can then refer to in the Tantra Loka to understand the Navatma Bhairava. So that's why I love the Paramartha Sara, because it's such a grounding, foundational kind of text that when you master it, in other words, when you learn it and really properly integrate it, it will help you in studying other texts, and it will help you in decoding very mysterious terms like Navatma Bhairava, which you're likely to encounter in the Vijnana Bhairava and other places. That's the first thing. What is the Navatma Bhairava? Secondly, what is the Trishiro Bhairava? It's possible that there is a text that we don't have anymore called the Trishiro Bhairava Tantra, Bhairava with 3 heads Tantra. So she could be referring to a text and the teachings in that text. But she's also talking about a 3-headed reality or a 3-pronged reality. What comes to mind is the trident here, and one is inspired to think of para, 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 and apara. And those are terms that Devī will also use in the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra. So the Trishiro Bhairava, the 3-headed Bhairava, might refer to the idea of para, transcendence, which is of course contrasted to immanence. If there is a transcendent, there must be an immanent, because otherwise, how can the transcendent be transcendent if it isn't transcendent to anything? But if there is a transcendent and if there is the immanent, then what to make of the reconciling point or something in between? Then we have to posit a third thing. So there has to be this basic trinity: transcendence, immanence, and something in between: transcendence, immanence. So para, apara, and para. Could this be the 3-headed Bhairava? This might be one suggestion that we can make tonight. And of course, there's also another thing that Devi talks about called the Shakti Traya. So as there is the Devi Traya, the trinity of goddesses, the triad of para, and apara, there is also the Shakti Traya, the triad of powers, mainly Icha Shakti, which takes the role of the transcendent, Jnana Shakti, which takes the role of the transcendent immanent, and Kriya Shakti, which takes the role of the immanent. So these 3 Shaktis, Shakti Traya, it's front and center in Somananda's description of the Absolute. The Absolute is consciousness endowed with these 3 powers of willing, knowing, and doing. So that's brought up. We have to talk about that a little bit. And you can see that Abhinavagupta does reference them in the Paramartha Sara. But not only that, there's a slightly more esoteric thing that's offered in the beginning of the Vijnana Bhairava that we have to go through. And this is where like knowledge of the Sanskrit language, or at least the syllabary of Sanskrit, and knowledge of linguistic mysticism, the Shabda Brahma Vada it's called sometimes. This is where this becomes very important. So we learn that there's something called the Matrika Chakra, which Devi calls Shabda Rashi. Shabda Rashi has the connotation of sun, actually, a solar house, and Shabda means sound. So what is the solar house that contains suns? So the the Kama Kala Vilasa, which is a Hadi Srividya text, it goes into detail in verse 11 about this like sun, and the sun that contains sounds, and the way the fire and Soma, the menses, the red color, and the semen, the white color of Shakti and Shiva respectively, how they commingle in that sun. And so now the sun is not presented as a body, like blazing orb in the sky. Instead, it's presented as an abstract point in space, which during the day is filled with fire, hence it looks like this, and during the night is filled with soma, hence it looks like the moon. So the moon is just what happens to the sun when it's full of soma. And this, what you're seeing now, is just when that place is filled with fire. So there's only 2 things: fire and soma, or menses and semen. In other words, Shakti and Shiva. And so their interplay, their lovemaking, otherwise known as the Kama Kala Vilasa, the playing of the desire of these 2, that's what creates the sun. But that is expressed in phonetic forms. In other words, it's expressed as sound, but also as word. So sound is now called nada. So just indeterminate vibratory force, or just resonance without any distinction or definition, is called nada. And to make matters more complicated, nada is but one level of that resonance. There are higher levels beyond nada, like nadanta. So going beyond nada, the end of nada, there's something even beyond pure resonance. And going beyond nadanta, there are things like Vyapini and Shakti and whatnot. And then beyond that, there's Samana and Unmana. So there's this whole like hierarchy of sound and linguistic mysticism that we are importing into the Tantric Shaiva tradition from Bhatrahari, from the Vakya Padiya and whatnot. Even the terms Prakasha and Vimarsha, you could argue, are not native to Shaivism. They emerge within the Shabda Brahmavada, and they are imported, incorporated into this school. So like that, we're going to have to encounter nada, but then we're also going to have to think about bindu and how bindu relates to nada. So bindu here literally means point, but it has the connotation of articulation, or it has the connotation of the indeterminate becoming determinate. So the resonance of nada, anta, shakti, vyapani, etc., the resonance of nada is like space, and within that space, bindu is how that space is configured. So think of nada as just all the colors that are available. That's just all one mass of color, indeterminate. Whereas bindu is the way that you would arrange that color in order to create this universe. So the painting itself, with its myriad forms, is based on color, but those forms itself are a particular configuration of color. So Bindu represents the configuration, Nada represents the space in which things are configured. So we have to learn something about Nada and Bindu because she brings up these terms, Nada, Bindu, and then she brings up terms like Ardha Chandra and Nirodhika. Again, these are all terms from the linguistic mysticism of Bhatrahari. Ardha Chandra refers to one level of the word. So too with Nirodhika, like that. So all of this can be understood through the mantra Om, and so you can dissect Om to see how it can be understood on every level of the word, Vaikari, Madhyama, Pashanti, Para, like that. Again, those terms are also borrowed. The idea of Pashanti, Madhyama, and Vaikari, those are not native to Shaiva non-duality. Those are there in Bhatrahari. What we add is the idea of Paravak, the fourth. So we present a para as the absolute in which Pashanti, Madhyama, and Vaikari appear. In Bhatrahari, Pashanti is the absolute. In fact, Pashanti is a feminine noun, right? So therefore, you could say Bhatrahari school is a Shakta school because their absolute nature of reality is understood as the feminine. And Somananda has a huge problem with this. And not because it's the feminine, but because the goddess is here described in dualistic terms. Because he says, and this is so interesting, it's a kind of linguistic argument that he makes. He says that if you call the goddess the seer, Pashanti means visionary or the seeing one. If you call her the seer, then doesn't there exist something to be seen? And if she is the seer, then she is distinct from the seen. And so, Bhatrahari, you propose Advaita, but the very word that you use for your absolute reality has already implied Advaita. So we must reject your school. And so, what you find in Somananda, like I was saying 2 weeks ago, is a rejection of Bhatrahari. Somananda would never dream of using the words Vaikari, Madhyama, Pashanti, because they are words used by a competing school that Somananda, one of the founders of our tradition, rejected. He had a big problem actually with Bhatrahari and with the linguistic mysticism of that because it was dualistic. And so he in chapter 2 or book 2 of the Shiva Drishti just like destroys them verse after verse after verse. It's almost like, as Nemec points out, there's like a personal vendetta almost, maybe. It seems like Somananda really dislikes that school and Pradyumna Bhatta and all that. So isn't it really weird then that Somananda's disciple Utpala will suddenly start using all those terms that Somananda would never have dreamt of using? Isn't it interesting that Utpala starts introducing Vaikari and Madhyama and Pashanti? Of course, with the caveat of Para. There's now this fourth reality, which is the one in which the three come and go. So the Trika that Somananda starts developing is then used by Utpala Deva and Abhinavagupta and others to later integrate the Shabda Brahmavadins. That's how we get these terms, Prakasha, Vimarsha. There is no Prakasha and Vimarsha in Somananda. It comes in Utpala only. But then we offered this argumentation last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. It was this that, Somananda, like I was saying in that class 2 weeks ago, was not really interested in writing for a broader audience. He was writing for initiates, people who had taken Diksha into the Tantric lineage and very likely his own like inner circle. So there was no need to accommodate a vaster or wider audience. Utpala is much more famous. His writing had much more circulation than Somananda's. Even now, we're much more likely to study Abhinavagupta and Utpala than we are to study Somananda, especially where the post-scriptural masters are concerned. And so Somananda's work, although foundational and although I think the most exalted in terms of its all-inclusive embrace of reality, is eclipsed by his students' work. But the benefit that Utpala Deva offers us is in kind of harmony and integration. So Utpala takes the tradition further by including within its umbrella other traditions. So it's almost like Google buying up smaller companies or something like that. You could think it's kind of like mergers and acquisitions. There were no what do you call them? Anti-merger laws or something like that. So there's this conglomerate of Shaiva non-duality, you can say. It's not really a conglomerate. Shaiva Siddhanta was still there. But yeah, they're they're buying Candy Crush and shit like that. They're just like absorbing the Saurya Marga, they're absorbing the Shabda Brahmavada. So you get all these terms like Vaikari, Pashanti, and of course, in between Vaikari and Pashanti, there's Madhyama. And when you take the word Om, you can understand that word on all levels Vaikari, Madhyama, and Pashanti. But then when we get to Para, then we get a whole new kind of linguistic mysticism being offered that's unique to this tradition. So when we talk about the Shabda Rashi, or when we talk about the Matrika Chakra, or the Chakra Rudha, the circle of sounds, or the circuit of energies, we're talking about phonetic powers, which are perhaps the hardest thing to understand. Which is the hardest thing to understand in the tradition. So these are all very subtle thoughts, very, very refined concepts. And so often, when some people hear these, right, there are many people who practice spiritual traditions. When they come into contact with these philosophies, they immediately say, "Oh, this is all just like, just eat the mangoes, Baba. Don't count the leaves, don't count the branches, or like, don't think about this stuff. Like, it's just gonna confuse you. Like, don't do this philosophy." I think, honestly, I'm sorry to say, but I think a lot of this is coming from their own intellectual inadequacy. They encountered something that's difficult to understand. They're frustrated that they cannot understand it, and their response to it is to say it's not worth being understood. So a lot of people, when they encounter what is now called Kashmir Shaivism, or when they encounter tantric philosophy, their head starts to spin because they just don't have the Sanskrit proficiency, or because they just don't have the philosophical refinement or depth, or because they just haven't like taken the time to think about these things, to think through them. So when people of authority, especially people of authority, are put in positions where they have to engage with these philosophies, often out of their own inadequacy, I think what they do is they dismiss this philosophy as being needless cogitation. But let's go back to that point that we were making earlier. If the mind must think, then you might as well learn to think maximally. In other words, you might as well refine your mind to its like very loftiest, and then only you can transcend it. So that's the sadhana. So instead of giving up the mind, and instead of giving up and not thinking about these things, instead we're doing the exact opposite, which is no, we are standing up and aspiring to something higher. So that's where the idea of a Shuddha Vikalpa becomes very important. Are these just more Vikalpas? Are these just more thoughts that clutter the mind? Do you know the Vijnana Bhairava seems to think so? The Vijnana Bhairava offers that the ultimate reality is in truth none of these ideas. Because in truth, all of these ideas are qualifying the unqualified absolute, and therefore, at best, they are means to an end. And nobody denies this. Nobody denies that the mind is a means to an end. Like the end is beyond the mind, but that doesn't mean the mind is not the means. I think that's a very important point. So, insofar as the ultimate reality is beyond the mind, we have to ask this question. Will thinking about these things help me attain the ultimate reality? Why don't I just give up the mind and give up thinking entirely? Well, firstly, we say you can't. We have to think, so we might as well think about these things. But there's something special about these thoughts. Abhinavagupta calls them Shuddha Vikalpas, which means when you keep thinking them, or when you keep rehearsing them in your mind, when you talk about them like this, or when you ask questions about them, when you struggle with them, when you understand them, when you forget them, all of this is important because it's called Vikalpa Sanskara, purifying thought constructs. Basically, the process of hearing Shuddha Vikalpas, cogitating on Shuddha Vikalpas, and then reflecting upon and integrating those Shuddha Vikalpas, what is otherwise known in the Advaita tradition as Shravana, Manana, Nidhyasana, that process will purify the mind because these thoughts are pure. And pure in the sense that they lead to silence. And so, unlike Ashuddha Vikalpas, which lead to more Vikalpas, these Vikalpas, since they arise from the awakened flame consciousness, they will take you back to the place from which they emerge. So, they are means to an end. No one will deny that the purpose here is to become a good philosopher. Who cares for that? Who cares about good PhD papers and university funding? Who cares about flexing how intelligent we are? That's always the risk with this kind of thing, because when you become powerful and when you become beautiful and intelligent, one forgets that these are means, not ends. So the purpose of the Tantric tradition is to empower you on every level, but that power serves a function, which is freedom. So we can easily get ensnared by the trapping of the Shastra. So we call them Shastra Jala, like the net of scripture, or like cogitating for the sake of cogitating, right? Like, so, yeah, like we get caught in the armchair process of it all. And so what's the solution? It's twofold. One, just keep doing what you're doing, like keep studying and keep going, but also supplement with other sadhanas like puja, like japa, supplement with meditation and with visualization, all those other things that use the mind more fully so you don't become developed in a lopsided way, where you're just developing the conceptual structures of the mind without also nourishing the artistic, intuitive structures of the mind. The whole mind should be employed. That being said, though, I think this is an important idea that you should have faith in these concepts. In other words, you should have faith that by daily repeating them, by thinking through them, by marinating your mind in them, they will convey you beyond them. That's why it's great to study this stuff. And don't let yourself get bullied by so many people in this world who will tell you that you shouldn't do this, that you shouldn't study, that you shouldn't learn, that you shouldn't like pick up Sanskrit. Because they'll all say, oh, you're just armchair, you're just like Hare, they struggled, they failed, and don't let them project their failures onto you. Immerse your mind in the oceanic wisdom of non-dual Shaivism. Don't be afraid of the refinement of the philosophical depth, because you have the ability, and we all have to struggle with it because it's all like maybe new, and even when it's heard again and again and again, it's subtle. And that's the beauty of it. So let's go to the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra now, and let's just see the way Devi lists all of these concepts, and then we'll see what the Paramartha Sara can do to help us understand them. So Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra, Sat is saying, yeah, see, they are. Lord Shiva and Ma Kali are demons. They are demons. Don't make any mistake. They are demons. Okay, so let's come over here. So here's the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra, the wisdom teaching of Bhairava. Shri Devi Vacha, the goddess said, and we'll have some time for Q&A in just a bit. Shrutam deva maya sarvam rudra yamala sambhavam trika bedam asheshena sarat sara vibhagashaha. Trika bedam asheshena. Asheshena means without any remnant, or I'm going to translate ashesha as completely. Do you know the word shesha, like shesha nag? So shesha means serpent. So shesha nag, actually the word doesn't actually mean serpent, it means remainder. So ashesha means without remainder. So I'm just going to translate this word as completely. So when I say the complete teaching, the literal word is called without remainder. So I have heard, Shuttam Deva, I have heard, thus have I heard, O God, the complete, sarvam, everything. I've heard the complete, I've heard all that is said or revealed in the sambhava, in the union of you and me. Rudra Yamala. So Yamala means union, Rudra means Shiva. So Rudra Yamala refers literally to the union of Shiva and Shakti, which means Tantra. So one way of understanding this is to say that the goddess has heard by now the complete teaching without anything left out, without any remainder, that has arisen from the union of Shiva and Shakti. In other words, she studied all of Tantra. But another meaning is that the Rudra Yamala Tantra is indeed a text. It's allegedly a very big text because lots of stuff is attributing the Rudra Yamala Tantra as its source. So it could be a fictional tantra, honestly. Like it might just be the name, like a placeholder name that we use. Um, these are all Shuddha Vikalpas. So these are like texts that existed maybe at one time that don't exist now. And so maybe she's referring to a text that we don't have access to. And she's saying that she studied the whole text. And this is probably a very, very vast text. Because the Vijnana Bhairava appears in the Rudra Yamala. The Karpuradi Stotram also appears in the in the Rudra Yamala. And they're very different texts. So the Rudra Yamala is a very diverse tantra. Bhairavi Nicola, it's good to see you today, Maharaj. So we have this huge text, and arguably there's lots of philosophy, a lot of practice and whatnot. And the goddess is saying that she has heard Shrutam Deva Maya Sarvam Rudra Yamala Sambhavam. I have heard totally without remainder everything that has arisen from our union. I have read in full without leaving anything out this Rudra Yamala Tantra. And importantly, she says it's divided into three things. Trika Bheda. So what are the three things? I mean, you could say the supreme, the immanent, and the supreme and the immanent combined, or you could say the para, the apara, the parapara in terms of knowledge. There are some things that the text says that are supreme, other things that are immanent, and she's saying she's heard the threefold division of the text. But that also probably refers to the three types of agamas that are available. So the union of Shiva and Shakti means Tantra because Shiva reveals something to her and she reveals something to him. And the Tantras can be understood in three categories. There are the Shaiva agamas, which are dualistic. There's the qualified non-dualistic agamas called the Raudra agamas. And there are the 64 Bhairava agamas. So the left-hand path, which is, so maligned and called the left-hand path, is just anything that includes the 64 Bhairavas. And the quote-unquote right-hand path is just anything that excludes the 64 Bhairava agamas. That's it. But the Bhairava agamas, of course, offer an Advaitic worldview, a goddess-oriented worldview, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes a somewhat transgressive worldview that says there's no purity or impurity, which is a crazy idea for Indians back then. But it's not that crazy now. There's so many people, by the way, who like go to ISKCON, which is one of the most puritanical expressions of Hinduism available in the world today. They go there and they have no problem singing and dancing and chanting to Krishna, although they're eating beef at home. I mean, that's like a vamachari, you know what I mean? Like they're loving God and they don't think it's a problem that they're eating meat. I don't think it's a problem to eat meat. I don't think it's a problem to do anything because everything is pure. But then people say, oh, it's Shakta, vamachari, like that. Hare, most Americans are vamacharis in the sense that the notions of purity and impurity that we have now are so different from the notions we had back then. And the Bhairava Agamas invited us to live a life that is more like a liberated life in like a Western liberal democracy. You know what I mean? It's like the Bhairava Agamas, I think, sensed that it was fine to have women in this space. It was fine to like engage in healthy sexuality. It was fine to engage in art and eating good food. You know, like that idea that your worldly life can be beautiful while you pursue spiritual life, that idea which is so maligned back then is actually, I think, more pervasively accepted now than we're willing to acknowledge. You know, like the idea that like, yeah, I can eat meat and go and sing Hare Krishna with the ISKCON people, and that's okay. That's kind of what the Bhairava Agamas seem to be espousing because they don't really have a strong like purity principle. Yeah, right? Like and so that's why I think the Shaiva Agamas and the Raudra Agamas, they're accepted because there's a bit more duality imposed and a bit more Puritan ideas. Whereas the Bhairava Agamas are like ousted by the right hand path, quote unquote, Dakshinachara or Shaiva Siddhanta. But if you take all three, then you have to understand that all three are the revelation of Lord Shiva. So it's not like the Vamacharyas, and sometimes they do this, but it's not like they're rejecting the Raudra Agamas and the Shaiva Agamas. If they did, they would lose the ground upon which to stand. Without the Shaiva Agamas, without Shaiva Siddhanta, there would be no Tantra whatsoever. You know, you can't have any Shakti without Shiva. Why? Because what will she stand on? And what's the point of having Shiva without Shakti? You know, who will dance on him? Like the idea is that both are important. And so she's saying the Sambhava, the union of Rudra Yamala, Rudra Yamala Sambhava. I have heard everything that is to be said in our union, O Lord, which has been divided into three parts. The three parts here refer to first the Shaiva Agamas, the dualistic tradition. There are 10 Agamas that are properly speaking called Shaiva Agamas by Abhinavagupta's calculation. In truth, there are innumerable. Many of them are not in Sanskrit, of course. And then, of course, there is the Raudra Agama system, which are 18 additional Agamas. Those 28 Agamas are accepted as authoritative by the Shaiva Siddhanta only. But then if you add the 64 Bhairava Agamas, you get the complete revelation. So the Vamacharyas, or rather you could say the Kaula practitioners or the non-dualist, they are not going to reject the Raudra Agamas or the Shaiva Agamas. You need those. Those are the foundations for the tradition. And most of what we discuss in the Bhairava Agamas can be traced even to the Shaiva Agamas. But they will accept the 64 Bhairava Agamas. And here you can see, to have a complete teaching, you should have the whole thing. You know, I think a fetishization of the left hand is also a problem. Because what about your right hand? And a fetishization of the right hand is a problem because in both cases you're choosing one without the other. You need Shiva and Shakti. And in other words, you need the union of the two in Yamala, in Sambhava. So you have two hands. That's the idea. And without the two hands, how will you pray? Without the two hands, how will you clap? Like that. So we accept all the tantras. And if we accept the whole teaching, the whole spectrum, then we're saying there's threefold divisions. Trika Bedam. So, oh God, oh God, oh God. Parvati is saying, Deva, Shuttam Deva Maya. I have heard, oh God, everything, Sarvam, that has arisen, Rudra Yamala, from our union, our Sambhava, the union that has come from the Yamala of Rudra. So now I've heard it all, and I've heard its threefold division into duality, qualified non-duality, and non-duality. Or I've heard the Paravidya, Aparavidya, and Paraparavidya. And I've heard all of it without remainder. In fact, and she goes, Sarat Sara Vibhaga Shaha. She says there's another division, Vibhaga. The Vibhaga means to divide, and within this Tantra, there's also a division, Sara, and that which is secondary. So there's the essential teaching, and there's like secondary teaching. So the goddess is saying, I haven't just learned the essential teachings, O Bhairava, I've also learned the secondary teachings. What are the secondary teachings? What are supplemental teachings? You could think maybe Jyotish, maybe grammar, like Vyakarana, maybe she studied Panini or something like that. But also you could think commentaries, because there are the tantras, like say there's the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra, but then there's also the Tantra Loka of Abhinavagupta, which seeks to explain the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra. Now, if you study just the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra, you might miss what it's really trying to say, or you might not understand it, because a lot is spoken of in somewhat veiled ways. But then if you take Tantra Loka and use it as a guide, then now you might understand more of the Tantra, because Tantra Loka is an exegetical attempt, or eisegetical, I would say, attempt to explain the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra. So maybe that's what she means when she says, I have studied the whole system without remainder in its threefold qualification as well as its primary and secondary literature. She could be saying, I studied the Tantras as well as auxiliary disciplines like grammar and astronomy and whatnot, and aesthetics and whatnot. Or she could be saying, I studied both the Tantras and their commentaries. I've studied everything. How beautiful. And so I argued this a long time ago, like when we, like 3 years or 4 years ago, I think maybe now, could be 4 years ago, started the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra series. I told you that there's an adhikari to the text, right? That like the text is actually a very high level text. What's the adhikari? It's offered in verse 1. Adhikari means competency. What level student do you have to be in order to benefit from the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra? And it says here in verse 1, you have to be the kind of student that has studied completely and without remainder the entire teaching Sambhava that has arisen from the Yamala of Shiva and Shakti. That means you should have studied all the Tantras in their threefold divisions with both the primary and secondary literature, meaning both the Tantras and their commentaries, or including the auxiliary disciplines like grammar and Jyotish and whatnot. Oh my God, how few of us are like at that level. But she's Parvati, she's the goddess. What can't she do? So she's already done all of this. And now look what she says. Having done all of this, the next thing she points out is this. She says, Adyapi, na nivritto me shamshayaha parameshwaraha. She says, but while, so api can mean like while, na nivritto means without removing, me shamshaya, my doubts. So I translated this as, but even now I have doubts. Parameshwara, O Supreme Lord. So having done all this, having heard the complete teaching of the Trika, and by the way, Shruttam is very important. This phrase, Shruttam Deva, it means she didn't just read the books. I think I'm giving maybe a false sense of academic mastery here because she didn't just read the books. She heard them. In fact, the Rudra Yamala is a Tantra, and a Tantra is only revealed to an initiate. So one has to be given Diksha, one has to be initiated in order to have access to Tantras. That's changing. The world is changing. Now we have access to Tantras without initiation, and that could be a problem. I think it's great that there's more inclusivity and access, but I also have to acknowledge that the tradition argues that if you just use mantras that you read in books, I mean, don't even look at the Kalanarnava Tantra when it comes to stuff like this, because they're like, if you meditate on the floor without any asan, you'll be impoverished. If you sit on cement and meditate on cement, you'll be poor your whole life. If you want siddhis, you should sit on tiger skin. If you want to control your mind, you should sit on deer skin. But they're very particular about what will happen to you if you sit wrongly. And then they say, if you chant a mantra that you read in a book without diksha, you will boil in the deepest hell. So to Satji, like if you left a group of Christians because of their fire and brimstone kind of language, wait till you read the Tantras, Ji. Oh my God. In them, there are all these claims of like, you'll go to hell if you do this. One Tantra says you'll go to hell if you don't drink wine. Another Tantra says you'll go to hell if you drink wine. Like, oh my God. It just seems like every other verse is, this will send you to hell, this will send you to deeper hell. At least the Christians only have one hell. We have like so many. This will take you to Rasatala, this will take you to Patala, and this one you'll be devoured here, this one you'll be boiled there. Like, whoa, chill. There are so many threats in the Tantras. Even in those very liberal, like left-leaning Tantras, you might think, right? Like, oh, left-leaning Tantras are all about freedom. Shiva says you'll go to hell if you drink wine without preparing it in the right way. Like he says in one of those Tantras. So it's not that the left doesn't have rules, it just has different rules. And it's not that the left doesn't have consequences for breaking them. There are different rules, but the consequences are like usually the same. So that being said, Diksha is very important because the tradition says so. The tradition says you should chant mantras that you heard, not read. And I think because I know, doesn't Lord Shiva seem so chill? And here's the thing, you guys. I think he's quite chill as he says it. Do you know what I mean? As he's revealing the rules and what will happen if you break them, I think he's totally relaxed. He's just like casual type shit, He's like, yeah, and if one were to drink wine without the proper preparation, they'll go to hell. But, they'll recognize me there also. Yeah, I can imagine he's like really chill about this. But if indeed the Tantras were spoken by Shiva, if indeed he revealed these things, no one can deny that in the Tantras these things are said. Because that's what's preserved, that's what's there available in the manuscripts. So, I mean, this would be easy to dismiss if you say, oh, it's just human authors. Like humans wrote the Tantras, and obviously in every religion, superstitions are going to creep in. You have the truth, but usually mingled with a bunch of superstitions. So Sri Ramakrishna would take this view. He said, all the scriptures of the world are like a mixture of sand and sugar. They have a lot of good in them, but they also have a lot of nonsense. Like, okay, God is great. God is the supreme. I shall have no God but God. And also, don't you dare touch a wet dog. Don't you dare do it. If you touch a wet dog, your prayer will be cancelled. Like, bro, what the fuck? Where'd you get that from? You can imagine someone who's having a divine experience, but who is not integrating it. I imagine a lot of these mystics are batshit crazy, but they've also seen God. And having seen God, they're now teaching people about God, but their batshit craziness starts to leak in. So I believe all the prophets of the world are batshit crazy, and that is not to dismiss what they revealed. That's not to take away from their holiness. I just think you have to accept that if you've seen God, you might also, as a person trying to maintain sanity in a body, get weird ideas like beans are wrong to eat, or pork is wrong to eat, or I don't know, like don't eat shellfish, or I don't know, like don't touch wet dogs. Like these are all like what? Like, and if you ask, why should I not eat hooved animals or something? Wait, can you eat hooved animals or no? Cloven hooves. No, remember we were talking about like kosher rules and like cloven.
Yeah, it's close.
You can eat the clove. If they have cloven hooves, you can eat them, right? Oh no, wait, if they have cloven hooves, you can't eat them.
Yeah, because cows have non-cloven.
Yes, so cows have non-cloven hooves, so you can eat them, right? Oh wait, no, sorry. Like Viranatha will know this better. You can only eat animals with cloven hooves. Or you can't eat this animal, you can't eat that animal. Like if you ask why, like it's very hard to say why. And so these are things that are like super like I don't want to say they're superstitions, there might be good reasons, energetic reasons, but like religions are full of stuff like this, right? They're full of things like, oh, like these things, don't do this, don't do that. Um, and so yeah, it could be that. It could be that they were speaking from their experience and what worked for them, and they were unable to offer any explanation beyond this just works, and this is what we tried. And so I think this might be true, but I hope you don't get offended if I make fun of it. But I'm saying that like in every scripture, there are lots of things that are nourishing and helpful, and there are also things that might be true of someone else's experience that might not be true of our experience. Or there might be things that have crept in there as a result of who knows what, that maybe don't really have anything to do with the absolute nature of reality. And so Sri Ramakrishna would espouse his view. All the scriptures in the world are good and true. Make no mistake. He rejects no holy book. Every holy book, the Bible, the Talmud, the Quran, all the scriptures of Hinduism, the Bhairava Agamas, which he practiced, the Shaiva Siddhanta Agamas, known as the Shaiva Agamas, the Raudra Agamas, he accepted all of that. He accepted the Upanishads, he accepted Ramayana, Mahabharata, so Puranas, Tantras, Vedas, he accepted all the scriptures in the world maximally. He was a Muslim. You have to remember that Ramakrishna practiced Sufism. And he was able to lead the prayers in the mosque. Arguably, he practiced Christianity. Some people dispute that he practiced Christianity because really all he did was look at a picture of Mother Mary. That was the extent to which he practiced Christianity. He looked at a picture and then had a vision of Christ and Mother. But anyway, um, in any case, you have to remember that Sri Ramakrishna maximally accepted all scriptures. There are many spiritual traditions that reject all scriptures maximally because of this. Oh, because they're full of superstitions, we should reject them all. Sri Ramakrishna was the opposite. He accepted them all, but with this caveat. He told us something important. He said, they also have a lot of superstition and like nonsense in them. And like, we're humans, and if we humans try to tell the truth, often our personalities start to creep in and we start to introduce idiosyncrasies. So my feeling is that so much of what the tantras say, so much of what the Bible says, so much of what any scripture in the world says is like that kind of weird superstitious stuff. It's not really like helpful. And so Sri Ramakrishna advocates for something like a selective reading of scriptures, which I know Orthodox Christians will reject. Why? Because then you're picking and choosing. You're not accepting the word of God in full. You're accepting your idea of the word of God, which I also am kind of sympathetic to this position. Because like, why should we pander to our ego's need to like make things make sense for us? But Sri Ramakrishna gave a different view. He said, what helps you spiritually is good for you, and what harms you spiritually is bad for you. And that's the only metric that you need to use. Swamiji said it in a different way. If it brings you strength, keep it. If it makes you weak, get rid of it. If something gives you strength, be willing to go down into hell to get a hold of it. So strength and joy and cheerfulness, and that doesn't mean that things are easy. Obviously, you have to be very spiritually discerning here. You're not fooling yourself into an easy or complacent life. You're willing to struggle, you're willing to challenge yourself, but only in a way that you deeply feel is spiritually nourishing. So Sri Ramakrishna would say, be discerning when you read the text. And again, I'm very sympathetic to the view that the ego likes to pick and choose. It only wants to hear what it wants to hear, and it doesn't want to hear what would actually be good for it. And so that's why I think many Orthodox Christians or many people in religious communities will say, either you take the whole thing or you don't take it at all. Because if you're only going to take parts, then, you're God now. You're the one who gets to decide what God's message is. Why don't you just let God decide his own message? Which is another way of saying, why don't you let Constantine tell you what God's message is? Right? Why don't you let the Nicene Creed tell you what the message is? Why don't you allow your pastor, who I don't think knows any Latin or Aramaic or Greek, tell you what the book, which is written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek, says? Let's just trust what this guy who doesn't know Latin says about a book that's written in Latin. Sure, gays are bad. Sure, like I guess that's what the book says. Like I don't know, but Sri Ramakrishna will say that there's no way to interact with the text and actually take it in its like true sense, because there's always going to be some interpretation. Since you're always going to be bringing some kind of hermeneutic into the text, what kind of hermeneutic are you going to use? And he says the only discernment that you can use is, does it help me or not? So when he presents the texts of the world, he says they're all true, but don't forget that they also have a bit of superstition and nonsense in them. So every text is like a mixture of sugar and sand, and you, like the ant, have to know how to get the sugar and leave out the sand, which is what great authors like Abhinavagupta and others are doing. They're taking the tantras and they're deriving what the tantras actually say or imply according to them, and kind of leaving out all that other stuff that maybe is, somewhat difficult to understand or even accommodate. So if you just read the tantras on your own, we might get the wrong impression, or I don't know, or the right impression. I don't know. But in any case, we have to be clear about this, that there are some pretty like strict rules in the tantras. And Lord Shiva, the chill guy that he is probably very casually, very nonchalantly like saying, "Oh, if you do this, you'll go to hell," etc. Fuck you guys. Why are we on this tangent? Like I'm having an old person moment now. Like I was talking about something, like we were on the ball, and now I'm just like, wait, what, why this rant about sugar and sand and being discerning? I don't know. But basically, the goddess is saying here that she studied all of the tantras. Oh, sorry. I remember now. Thank you. Thank you. It was about Shruttam Deva Maya Sarvam. She's heard the text. So remember, in these texts, which are often filled with many superstitions, there is a strong emphasis on diksha. Until you take initiation into a lineage. In other words, until you hear the mantra, not read the mantra, until you hear the mantra from a licensed, authorized teacher. And by that is meant anybody who is part of a lineage who is given authority to give the mantra. So you could say there are like systems for this. Like, does that teacher have Purna Abhisheka? So, like, for instance, the teacher's guru has to sign off on that teacher's giving Diksha. Because if the guru doesn't do that, it's like people getting married without their parents' consent. Because then the parent might not send any money. You know what I mean? It's like if you run away, if you elope, then you have to just move to Haight-Ashbury and make it on your own. Right? Like you can't call home for money because your parents don't support the wedding, maybe you could say. But if your parents are down, then maybe they'll get you the toaster that you put on your Target registry or something. I don't know. So that being said, your guru must know and must like consent to you doing it. Otherwise, maybe the guru's energy is not flowing through you like that. So that's important, I think. Abhikshayam, like the consecration is important, whereby a guru signs off on their students' legitimacy and authority in passing on the lineage. But also, you have to remember that a lot of this is Gurukula based. So it's family based. So, for instance, actually, my student, like my main student, should be my son. Uh, Traditionally, it should be my son. And my main guru should be my father. Traditionally, whose guru must be his father. That's just how we do it in the Gurukula system. But in my household, it was interesting. My father was not really that interested in learning this stuff. I mean, he was more interested in like, I mean, he can perform all the pujas and he does. Now he's doing all the pujas at home. But he's more like, his puja is his work as a doctor. Like he's just a surgeon in the world doing his work and doing dharma. And so he's not inclined to spiritual teaching, though he is inclined to teaching. So he teaches, but he teaches medicine. He doesn't teach Shastra, he teaches medicine. And although he practices Shastra, his main like life is karma yoga, like that. So my grandfather was living Shastra. Like he was all day long, he would just study Shastra and host spaces in which Shastra is taught, etc. So my grandfather is my guru, and by right, it should be my child or something like that, who is the guru, whose child will then be the guru. And so then you could say there's a Abhishekam system in which the guru decides that the student is fit to now teach. Usually it's the eldest child, or if it's not a family structure and it's like a wider group, then it's the eldest student, or not necessarily the eldest, but the most qualified student. So like Swami Vivekananda was the inheritor of Sri Ramakrishna's parampara in the sense that he was arguably the most advanced of those boys who were the inner circle of Sri Ramakrishna. You could argue that. But also, Gurukulas continue in terms of like when the guru passes away. So if a guru were to pass away without Purna Abhishekam, then the eldest son or the eldest student or the senior most respected student, which might not be in terms of age, will then inherit what is called the Guru Mandala, meaning that person now takes the role of that guru in lieu of the guru. So the person becomes a mahant, to use the monastic phrase. So that being said, there's this system, as it were, to determine authority to initiate. But it's an ancient system with many, many modifications in the modern era. And so ultimately it comes down to a student's discernment, as in whether or not a teacher is going to be valuable. So now Sri Ramakrishna will bring in that same thing, which is about discernment. Like, is this really a teacher who can help me? Or am I really the kind of student who can be helped by this teacher? Is this really a lineage that I resonate with? Etc., etc. Now, once we find that lineage and once we find that teacher, something happens. And that is called upadesha or diksha. Now, diksha could be in terms of a teaching or it could be in terms of a mantra, but in almost every case, it's heard. It's a private thing. It's like the teacher, as a human, speaks to you, another human, about the ultimate nature of reality, or gives you a mantra through which that ultimate nature can be accessed. So that, therefore, when the goddess says, Shrutam Deva Maya Sarvam, I have heard everything that is Sambhava said in the Yamala, the union of Shiva and Shakti, or I have heard everything that is said in the tantras in their threefold division, including the secondary literature. The fact that she says, I have heard it, is important, which means she received it in Diksha, or she received it as part of a lineage from Shiva, obviously. So she heard it from him directly. And that's a really, really important point, that not only has she mastered all of this academically, she's attained it energetically. She has the adhikari, the competency to attain it, because she took Diksha into it. So the word Shrutam Deva might imply that. Thus have I heard. And that's why the Kaularnava Tantra says, if you read mantras, you'll go to hell. Don't chant mantras that you read anywhere, like on the internet or in the books. I say don't worry about that. It's enough to like chant sincerely to God. But I just want you to know that I'm contradicting what Shiva said in the Tantra on this point. This is where I'm trying to make a distinction between sugar and sand. And I'm saying that if you find it spiritually nourishing to chant mantras that you read in a book or on the internet, that's good. But I'm also saying, and I often say, that that shouldn't be where you stop. Like, may that inspire you to seek out real Diksha. And more importantly, may that be the way in which the Guru is attracted. So please feel free to chant all mantras, but also don't dismiss the power and importance of Diksha, especially within the Tantric tradition. But that isn't to say that there aren't people who have attained everything without Diksha. It's not absolutely necessary. So yeah, that's the thing. So try to get a mantra from a lineage if you can, but until then, don't sit around on your palms. Do something. And what does it mean? Chant whatever mantra you love. Maybe you took Diksha into it in a past life. I don't know. Chant it. But Shiva does say don't chant any mantras that you've read in a book. But then also there's a strong rule against writing mantras down. So sometimes when a person gets mantra and diksha, right, their first instinct is to want to write it down. I think about the movie Almost Famous, and there's a scene where this young Cameron Crowe wants to take notes. He's at the show, and he's writing a story on this band, and he's backstage and he's watching the band go on, and then he pulls out a notebook and he wants to start writing and he wants to take notes. And then Penny Lane, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, who was his mentor in the movie, she's like horrified that he would do this. So she takes the book, she pushes down the book and pen, and she goes, in other words, just experience this. Just be here, be in this moment and receive the experience, and then write about it later if you want. But right now it's time to receive. And whenever people ask in like the context of mantra, they're like, oh, can I write this down? That scene comes to mind of Penny Lane being like, no, relax. Put the book down. Put the book down. Don't write it down. And this is the thing, right? Sometimes mantras can be really long, or this might be the first time you heard certain bijas, a certain arrangement of bijas, and there comes this anxiety of like, oh my God, what if I forget the mantra that I was told in Diksha? Oh no, that's perfectly fine. But like we have to do this, right? Like we have to write them down because we might not remember them. But this is our assurance. If you take mantra from a human being, chances are that person isn't going to die the very next instant. They could. And in many cases, they might leave, right? Like in India, there's so many cases of like your guru coming, giving you a mantra, and then just fucking off forever. You don't know any address to write him or her to, right? Like, because they're sadhus. They wander about. A good story here is Kamalakanta, the saint and mystic, the Kali Bhakta Kamalakanta. So when he was a child, this is the legend, he was wandering about, and suddenly a sadhu, a Bhairava with a trident and with matted locks, just appeared and saw him and was so impressed with him. Because I think he was in the middle of singing a song to Kali or something. And that sadhu was like, oh my God, this guy, he's going to be a great saint. I better initiate him. So the Bhairava told him to sit down. And here's the thing, he's a child. He doesn't know. What does he know about all this stuff? He told him to sit down and whispered a mantra into his ear. A Kali mantra. So he gave him, and then he went into samadhi. Like as a 9-year-old, a young boy, he just went into samadhi. And this sadhu fucked off. This sadhu gave him the mantra. I feel like it's kind of strange to leave a child alone in the woods in samadhi, but the sadhu knows what he's doing, you know. Sadhu gave him the mantra and then fucked off, and Komalakanta never saw his Diksha Guru for years after that. And if he wanted to like go and meet him, he couldn't. He wouldn't know where to find him. He didn't know his name. He probably wouldn't even remember what he looked like. And by the way, he probably looked like every other Bhairava with a trident and with long jata and covered in ash. And it doesn't help that they're all covered in white also, because at mosques who, you know, like they're just scrawny Indian guys with big beards covered in basma, holding a trident and wearing jata. Like, throw a rock, you can't help but hit one of those. Which one is my guru? I don't know. And he's back in Varanasi now. Which smashan he's sitting in, I don't know. But he gave me a mantra, right? And that mantra that he gave me, that's the mantra through which I will realize Kali, but I only ever heard it once. And so you can imagine the anxiety of that. Like if somebody tells you a mantra and then fucks off and you don't know where they are and you don't even know how to like contact them because there are no phones or addresses for letters, then you'll be like, oh my God, I was given something so precious, but I lost it. I forgot it. I forgot the mantra. Being left in the woods in samadhi is like, yeah, yeah. And you look there like in the mystic ocean. What is it? The psychotic, I shouldn't say psycho, that's pejorative. I say it with a lot of love. I am that. But a psychotic drowns in the same ocean that a mystic swims happily in. It's the same ocean, the ocean of the subconscious mind. So he just left, sink or swim, buddy. You know, here's a mantra, go into samadhi, and then good luck, good luck. But in any case, that happens. That people come and they give a mantra and then they just fuck off and you never see them again. But in Kamalakanta's case, you know what's really beautiful? In his adulthood, that guru came back, but not in person, in vision. So the guru appeared in vision, like a luminous body appeared in his room one night. He was staying in this small house with his wife, and the guru appeared, I think, in a dream or like in that state right before you fall asleep or during meditation. I forget exactly how. But then the guru said, now, Komalakanta, it is time to have a Panchamundi asana. And so he was instructed to collect 5 skulls and create the Panchamundi and sit on the Panchamundi and do japa. Once I wanted to sit on Sri Ramakrishna's Panchamundi. I was looking for it and I asked, is it possible for me to sit on it? And the person who showed it to me said, don't you dare try that. He said with all sincerity, he said, you will be reduced to bhasma. In other words, that Panchamundi is so powerful that if I were to sit there, I would be annihilated. And so his strong caution was, do not sit on another sadhu's Panchamundi. And more importantly, do not sit on Sri Ramakrishna's Panchamundi. And do not sit on Komalakanta's Panchamundi. You can't. There's a temple and now it's like, you can't actually sit on it. But if you find a Panchamundi, my caution, unless mother inspires you to do differently, is be careful, don't sit on it, because you never know what will happen, what kind of energies are there. Panchamundi means a 5-skull seat. We say the best way to chant the Divine Mother's mantra is to sit on 5 skulls and use a bone mala. This is what the texts say. So we chant on human bones, ideally human bones, but you can use buffalo bones. We have buffalo bones. We use the Mahishas. But I always feel like I have my own bones, right? I use this. Here are my human bones. But anyway, if you want to chant to Kali, we say the best way to do that is in a smashan, in a cremation ground, seated on 5 skulls. There are tantras like the Yogini Tantra from Assam, not to be confused with the Yogini Hridaya. Once, somebody brought this tantra up to me. They were like, have you studied the Yogini Tantra? And I was like, do you mean the Yogini Hridaya Tantra? And then I Googled the Yogini Tantra, and the first thing that I saw on the Wikipedia page for it was, not to be confused with the Yogini Hridaya, the Yogini Tantra is a Tantra from Assam. And I was like, that's exactly what I did. There's a famous Tantra called the Yogini Hridaya and the Sri Vidya tradition. Anyway, in the Yogini Tantra, not the Yogini Hridaya, in the Yogini Tantra, there's like 1,000 skull asanas, Sahasra Munda asanas, and Shat Munda asanas, 100 skull asanas. Like, oh my God, like where do we even get all those skulls? And the text says you need specific skulls. So I need the skull of a dog eater. So by the way, if any of you come across a dog eater, and there is some legal and safe way to procure that dog eater skull, I'm in the market for one, okay, if you have one of those. But I don't know where to get a dog eater skull. I don't know who eats dogs, and I don't know how to get their skull. And I'm not gonna like, do anything illegal or anything like that. But um yeah, yeah, right. Ramana Maharshi said, where could I go when his devotees were weeping? He said, don't go, they're still on their asana, right? It's like, so the asana is very important. The seat is very, very important. So here's the thing. Actually, what is the thing? Why am I on this asana business? Oh, Komalakanta, right? So his guru appeared to him in a dream and said to him, build the Panchamundi asana. And so he's still getting instructions from his guru, but it's not always the case. Okay, good, good. Oh my God, that would be amazing. If you could find me one of those, I would really very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah. Look, you guys, if there's a legal and safe way to procure skulls, I'm always in need of them. So if you're not using them yourselves, Whatever skull you have, I always appreciate. Thank you. Anyway, but no, okay, here's the thing. Komalakanta had a guru who initiated him, and don't do anything illegal. It's very important that I say that. And are you serious? Like an actual, wait. By the way, there's that story of the revenant, and the revenant is like a ghost that terrorizes people. But the way to get rid of a revenant, according to legend, is by burning the bones of that person. Because the bones are what remain, and when a person is so identified with their body, or if they die suddenly out of nowhere, they might not be ready to transition. So that person's ghost or revenant is still hanging around their bones. That's why in the Smashan there are so many bhutas, because they don't know where else to go, and then they're just attached to that body, which is now just bones. So one way to help them go is to burn all the bones. It's really interesting. If you don't burn all the bones, they might not be pushed into the next birth. So if you have a skull or a femur or any other kind of bone, the person to whom that bone belonged might still be attached to it and might follow you if you take the bone. Anyway, I'm totally digressing. But this is all about the Panchamundi asana. And so Komalakanta. Yeah, exactly. Komalakanta, yeah, it also works with animals. Animal spirits, I mean, they could also fuck you up. I mean, like an animal might not like that you're using its bone in that way. And so, like just the other day, I mean, passing, my point is that Komalakanta had a guru, but the guru left him very quickly. And so there's an anxiety I think that we feel, maybe some of us, that like if I don't write down my mantra, I might like forget it. And if my guru were to leave right now, if he, she, or they were to die right now after giving me the mantra, or if they were to just like up and walk away, then what am I gonna do? I've received a mantra and it's so valuable and I don't even remember it. So that's the thing, right? So like if we receive a mantra in a dream, it's very important that we remember the mantra, because then we won't be able to use it while we're awake. So we should pray for that dream again, or we should ask for clarification. And in the case where we get a mantra through a dream, in it's interesting because sometimes we find that when we go and take a mantra in person, there are cases where it's the same mantra. It's like chilling, where we get a mantra in a dream and then we go and we find a guru and then the guru gives us that mantra and we're like, what? Not always. Sometimes it's different. But that's why we recommend in-person diksha, like waking state diksha. Not always. But even if we've received diksha in a dream, that's sometimes a precursor for getting diksha here. The only reason why it would be valuable to get diksha here while awake is so that we can remember the mantra. And that's why we like to write stuff down, but we shouldn't, because it does say in the Tantra that a mantra written down loses its power. That's the first thing my guru told me when he gave me my mantra. He said, don't write this down. Don't text it, because it said in the Tantras that we shouldn't write mantras down. Okay, having said that, just know that there's a lot of sugar and there's a lot of sand, and we have to be discerning about these kinds of things. I generally don't like to write mantras down. But then the padati, what is a padati but a series of mantras written down? So my rule is typically with diksha mantras. We don't write diksha mantras down. But here's the thing, if you have a human guru, you can just ask them, assuming they don't leave on the spot and assuming they don't die on the spot, you can just ask them again. And you can ask them again and again and again and again. One time I was sitting with my guru and he was on the phone with someone who called the day after Diksha and was like, what was the mantra again? And I could see my guru like kind of getting frustrated because he kept trying to say it over the phone, but the person just could not pronounce it. But the whole exchange happened for like 15 minutes of my guru on the phone, like saying the mantra, saying the bija, and waiting for that person to like just learn how to say the fucking bija. But he was like, the fact that he's willing to do that work is why he's a guru. Like the fact that Arjuna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita is not the final person to ask a question, but Krishna is, shows you what a guru is like. Shri Krishna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita is like, so have all your doubts been removed? And if Arjuna says, well, wait one moment, Shri Krishna would be ready to give the whole Gita again in a different way to help him realize. See, the problem in our current world is that guru yoga, the guru-student relationship, is about the guru because of the media and because of like the way that we, honor celebrities and stuff like that. So we're more interested in the cult of personality of the guru. We want to see the guru. We don't care about the student. How many internet personalities are there right now who are big gurus, but we don't know who their students are? We don't know what their students are like. How will you ever gauge a guru until you see their students? Because the guru could be a great speaker, the guru could even be super powerful and super liberated, but that does not make them a guru. That just makes them a liberated being. A guru is someone who can teach, and like the quality of a teacher is only discovered in the student. And so the guru exists for the student, not the student for the guru. Now we have it all backwards. Now the guru expects money from the students. The guru expects foot massages from the students, or at the very least, like you have to like do stuff and seva and all that stuff. But no, the seva is from the guru to the student. The student is God, and the guru's role is to help the student realize that. And so the point then of a guru is somebody that you can continually ask for support. So if you forget your mantra, just ask them. You can call them later and ask them to repeat it or something like that. Anyway, having said all of this, the tantras do warn us that we shouldn't write mantras down. We should hear them. They should be spoken. They should be spoken by a human being, a living human being, to another human being. And when they're spoken, they are heard. And when they are heard, they are received. So verse 1 of the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra talks about the 3 types of tantras: Shaiva agamas, the 10 dualistic agamas; the Raudra agamas, the 18 not qualified non-dualistic agamas; and of course the 64 Bhairava agamas, of which the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra is one. The Vijnana-Bhairava is a Bhairava agama because, of course, it's called Vijnana-Bhairava for crying out loud, but it's also very kaula and very transgressive in its orientation, very non-dual in its orientation. So we have these 3 divisions. We have the primary literature and we have the secondary literature, like Utpaladeva's Ishvara Pratyabhigya Karika, or like Abhinavagupta's Tantra Loka or Tantra Sara, or like Jayaratha's Vivriti, like Kshema Raja's Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra Vivriti, like Vimarshana, I think it's called. So there are all these texts and their secondary exegetical, eisegetical supplements. There are all these different kinds of agamas, and what it means to have heard all of it completely without remainder is to have heard it through Diksha. And so we often say, take Diksha, it's very important. Tantric traditions tend to recommend it. So I just want to take these 2 questions before I continue. There's some very beautiful questions here. So Argya Patra Devi is asking, oh, wait, is the recording? No, the recording is on, right? Good. Oh, yeah. Wait, where is it? What about hospitals and funeral? Okay, cool. Yeah, both are, to Anatmanji, both are nice. We can always use both. And where's this question? There's got to be a way to get them. I saw a question earlier. Oh, Lekha is asking, what about writing repetitions of mantras? Yeah, this is called Likita Japa. So some people do this sadhana where they like write mantras again and again and again. So it's called Likita Japa. And if you go to certain temples, like the Hanuman temple in Varanasi, Sankatamochana, there you'll see hundreds, if not thousands of people all sitting. So many of them are just chanting Hanuman Chalisa, Ram Charitmanas, Tulsidas, like that. But some of them are like writing the mantra again and again and again and again. And the walls are full of the mantra written again and again and again and again. And there's just down the road from Sankata Mochana, there's a temple called I forget what it's called, but it's like a Tulsidas temple. Just call it the Tulsidas temple. But in there, all the walls are just covered with Ram Charitmanas. The whole temple is just written Ram Charitmanas. So that's a really cool practice, but I don't know anything about that. That's not really like in my lineage. It's not something that I do. It's not something that my guru does. I know that it is a practice. Likita Japa it's called. But I don't really do it. So I can't really comment on that. But I do know that the tantras that I'm referencing now, like the Kularnava Tantra and others, they say don't write mantras down. And they also say don't read mantras. It's best to receive mantras directly from a teacher, right? Like, and who knows, this could be a self-aggrandizing or very convenient claim that gurus are making in order to maintain hegemony over knowledge. Like, let's be open to that possibility too, right? Like, some of these tantras might be co-opted by political agendas, whereby people are discouraging you from finding out stuff on your own in order to maintain the hegemony of like a gurukula. I don't know. I'm just going to offer that as one possibility. Obviously, that's not what we think, but it could be. It could be. We should always be open to that. In any case, yeah, about writing repetitions of mantras. I don't know about that. I just know that there are tantras that say we shouldn't write them down, and tantras that say that we shouldn't read them. We should receive them. Do students ever get fired? Yes, absolutely, all the time. So guru should also get fired, by the way. If your guru is not being a good guru, always reserve the right to walk away. I think this is so important. Like, you will probably feel like you can't. You'll feel like, oh, I owe this person something, or oh, I love this person. How can I walk away from them? Or, oh my God, I'm a part of this community. I found my husband in this community and he still wants to go to the satsangs. Or, oh my God, I have friends in this community. My whole life is this community. Okay, if your whole life is a community, you're in trouble. If you have no life outside of that community, then I'm afraid that's a cult, and not in the fun way. I'm in the fun way for a little while until it's not, you know? So be careful, like, have a life, have friends that are not friends within the community, you know, and like, and always know that you don't owe anybody anything. So I think guru should get fired. Community should get fired. That doesn't mean the guru is bad or the community is bad. It just means that it's not for you anymore. It might have been for you at one point, and it might be that for somebody else. But if you, for your own sake, decide that this is no longer spiritually nourishing, always reserve for yourself the right to walk away. A guru is less likely to do that because a guru, like it, hopefully the guru has been careful in selecting students and therefore is discerning with Diksha. And so then the guru can act on their dharmically required obligation of seeing the student through. So until the student achieves the goal, the guru is not finished, and the guru is beholden to continue reincarnating until the student finishes their work. So in one sense, the guru is less likely to walk away because there's a kind of sunk cost fallacy. But I also advise people who are spiritual teachers to exercise this walking away power. Sometimes we do more harm by sticking around than by walking away. And sometimes when we determine that a student is no longer able to profit from the interaction or like learn in a way that's like nourishing for the student, then sometimes I think a teacher, out of love and out of discernment, hopefully never out of exasperation, might step away. So yeah, I think students do get fired a lot of times. But I think we should fire gurus more. And I think gurus maybe should fire students more just to maintain the integrity of communities and to maintain learning beyond all this like human political stuff. I thought there was a question some time ago about like YouTube mantras. I was scrolling, but I couldn't find it. Yeah, I can't find it, but oh, here it is, here it is, here it is. Does hearing a mantra on YouTube equate to reading it in a book? So yeah, this is new. For the first time in history now, there's like this kirtan culture where bija mantras are said in kirtan. Usually, bija mantras are only said in a diksha context or a puja context, or recently, like maybe an academic context. So there's a new context now, an academic one, in which bija mantras are said. But it would be uncouth for me to say a bija mantra. Instead, I should refer to it like, say, the Hrit bija or the Lajja bija or the Kurcha bija. If I say Kurcha bija, you should know what I'm talking about. If I say Maya bija, you should know what bija I'm talking about. If I say Shrishti bija, you should know. So Shrishti bija is, this one. Maya bija is like that. Like, so these are the ways that we talk about bijas indirectly. So there are now like a new context, which is Spotify or YouTube kirtans in which bijas are said aloud. Again, this is all the Divine Mother's will. And it's possible that when you hear a bija mantra from a YouTube video, you get some kind of recognition or some kind of excitement. And again, if something is spiritually nourishing to you, keep it. I once asked my guru about inadvertent diksha. There's a wonderful story where Kabir, he's a Muslim weaver. So it was really difficult for him to get Diksha. Nobody wanted to give him Diksha because he was a Muslim, so he legendarily, and we were here at this ghat. It's one of my favorite ghats actually because the Trilanga Swami temple is just there. So if you walk down the steps from the Trilanga Swami temple, that ghat is called Panchaganga Ghat. And the Shiva here is named Panchaganga Nath because his first puja was on that ghat. But that Panchaganga Ghat is allegedly the ghat where Kabir Das came. And early in the morning, he laid down on the steps leading into the Ganga. And his guru, his soon-to-be guru, who refused to initiate him, happened to be walking down those steps for his morning ablutions, for his bath. And Kabir knew this. So Kabir Das was lying down, waiting for the guru to come. And the guru came and accidentally stepped on him and was shocked. Because sometimes crocodiles and whatnot. So he went, Ram, Ram! And he was shocked. And then Kabir got up and he was like, aha! You said the name of God in my presence, therefore you have initiated me. I have heard, O Guru, the name of Ram from your lips, and therefore... See, so he could have read this in a book, but it was important to him that he heard it from the lips of his Guru. Was that Diksha? And the Guru was like, fuck, you got me. All right, come here, let me teach you. Was that Diksha? Because it happened to my Guru too. Like, he was at Kashi Vishwanath, also in Varanasi, and he was sitting there doing japa inside the temple, and somebody walked in and went, Ram, 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 like really excitedly, and he said his... hairs stood on end, and I asked him, you got a hit from that, like there was a transmission. Would you consider that a diksha? I mean, that person inadvertently transferred some energy and more importantly said the mantra aloud in your presence. And is that not diksha? And my guru said it like this: if you can see it that way, that's perfectly fine. In other words, if that's what it was for you, then that's what it was, and you can achieve everything through that. And so we have in mind now Ekalavya. Ekalavya's story is really beautiful because Dronacharya refused to take him on as a student. So what he did is he made a clay statue of Dronacharya and practiced archery every day in front of the clay statue of Dronacharya. It's a pretty tragic story though, because he becomes so good that he's better than all the Pandavas. And then later they come and like Dronacharya cuts his thumb off. Oh, whoa. So maybe that's the consequence, right? Like if you don't go through a proper lineage, you do it your own way. I don't know. But it's such a sad story, but the point of the story that I like is this. Before the jealous Dronacharya comes and chops off Ekalavya's thumb, before that point, one thing you should acknowledge was that he attained mastery in archery without ever learning from Dronacharya by just constructing clay statue of Dronacharya. And that's what people do today. They've never met Ramana Maharshi. They've never met Nisargadatta Maharaj. And yet they're willing to call those people their guru. Are they wrong? I don't think so. I mean, they're taking inspiration from them. Sometimes they see them in dreams. They feel a living connection to that person. Why not? Maybe they were disciples in a past life. All of that's really great. I just think when it comes to Diksha, I'm a bit more of a humanist in that I do like living humans that I can see and talk to who know I exist, you know? I'm a bit, in that sense, kind of skeptical and grounded. I don't really like believe my own mind when it tells me this particular guru has come to give me some kind of mantra. It's like, I don't know, that's not delusion, but I do know my guru, you know, who I can just like go to down the street right now and like talk to him about stuff. And he knows me. So I think that's important to me, but that's just my disposition. For other people, they have no problem believing dreams and believing their connection to a particular guru. If that's real for you, that's real for you. No one should have any right to say that that isn't real. The important thing is your spiritual nourishment. Is it spiritually nourishing or not? So the way my guru said it was so beautiful. It was just like, if it's that for you, then it's that for you. Kind of the Kabir Das principle or the Ekalavya principle. But I insist in our community upon intentionality. Is something yours if it's stolen? And can anything really be stolen? We say it should be given. In other words, the guru should intend to initiate you. In other words, the guru should intend to give you a mantra and you should intend to receive it. And by the way, if the guru intends to receive a mantra and you don't intend to receive it, then again, it's not diksha. Intention, I think, is important on both sides. So the guru should intend to give it to you and give it directly to you. You know, so I'm also not a fan of like group dikshas, though in fact I think they can be kind of helpful. So there might be like a big room and you say, okay, here is a mantra and you give it to the whole room. I still don't think that counts for me. It could for you, but for me, I think I prefer a personal thing where it's like the just two. And I like this idea of like there is a teacher, there is a student, either over a dhuni or over puja or in some kind of sanctified space, the transference occurs. The teacher intends to do it, the student intends to do it, the teacher speaks it to the student hears it from the teacher. I'm a traditionalist, that's what I call diksha. You know, and that doesn't take away from any dream experience or any like other teacher that you might be connecting with through your reading or through your study. Like those teachers, you could argue, are the reason why we found ourselves in this situation. And so the human teacher is a representative of all those historical teachers or like divine teachers or something like that. But I think it's important that in verse 1 of the Vijnana-Bhairava Tantra, the claim is made, Shruttam Deva Maya Sarvam, like I have heard, O Lord, all the teachings of the Tantras, both primary and secondary, from all the threefold divisions, from the Shaivagamas, Raudragamas, Bhairava-agamas, the supreme, the immanent, the supremely immanent, like I've heard all of that. That's the first thing that Devī says. And then the next thing that she says is really interesting, but now I have doubts. She says, but even now, adyapi na nivritto me shamshaya parameshvara, but even now I have doubts, O Supreme Lord. Now, this is the role of the guru, to entertain doubts and to remove them. So she naturally, because she is the disciple and Lord Shiva is the guru in this case, asks about this. She asks, what is the ultimate nature of reality, O God? Is it the pervasive mass of sounds known as the Shabda Rashi? So now we come to the first tantric concept, which we introduced at the beginning of this talk. So we said there are a few ideas that we have to encounter and learn about. So she's asking, what's the ultimate nature of reality? Kim rupam tattvato deva shabda rashi kalamayam. What is the ultimate? And now she offers a few possibilities, like a few things that she's learned. So she's demonstrating her understanding. Having studied the whole Tantra in its primary and secondary sources, in its threefold division, without any remainder, completely through Diksha, now she's showing, I mean, flexing a little bit, I might say. She's showing that she's like understood all these things. And she's asking which one of these concepts, which are spoken about in the Tantra, refers to the absolute. Is it the Shabda Rashi, the mass of 50 phonemes? Is it, and then she goes, or is it the ninefold Bhairava among the forms of Bhairava? Or is it the three-headed Bhairava? Or perhaps it is the triad of powers, Icha, Jnana, Kriya. Is it the Nada? Is it Bindu? Is it the Ardha Chandra? Is it Nirodhika? Is it the circle of consciousness? That is to say, is it the Anachka means like vowelless mantra? Or is it Shakti? Shakti Swarupakam. And then she says, and again, while all of the aforementioned might pertain to the transcendent, immanent, or even the immanent, if we were to think of the transcendent supreme goddess in these ways, would that not contradict her essence or her transcendence? So this is the way I've translated viruddhyate. Viruddhyate means contradict or negate. So if indeed this was the highest reality, if Shabda Rashi was it, if the ninefold Bhairava was it, if the three-headed Bhairava was it, if the triad of powers was it, like if any of these could describe the absolute nature of reality, then there's a contradiction. So now Devi is calling out a contradiction. She's saying this might be fine for the immanent, which is always divided and dualistic and qualified, and it might be fine for the transcendent immanent, which is still somewhat qualified, but it cannot apply to the transcendent because the transcendent transcends language and thought and categories and qualifications. So then she says, verily the transcendent supreme goddess cannot be qualified. Nahi varna vibhidena. Vibhidena means divided, but I translate it as qualified. So she cannot be divided into 50 letters. And nor can she be divided into this or that body. She can't have a form. How can she be transcendent? And by the way, what it means to be transcendent is to be unqualified, what is called nishkala, without parts. How can she be nishkala if indeed she is sakala? If she indeed is thought of as having parts, as per the Shabda Rashi system, or the Ardha Chandra system, or the Nirodhika, or the Nada, or the Bindu, or the Trishira Bhairava, like whatever, like all of these are parts. They're all forms. How can the absolute be considered transcendent and without parts if you insist on it having parts? And then she finally says, Prasadam kurume nata nishesham chindis samshayam. Bless me with this grace, O Lord, and totally remove my doubts. And here Bhairava is so excited. In other words, he's so happy that she's like mastered the Tantra to this level. And Bhairava Vacha, he says, Sadhu, sadhu, toya, sadhu, sadhu, well done, well done. Toya prishtam, tantra saramidam priye. Oh my dear, oh my beloved. This, idam, this that you have asked, Tvaya Prishtam, is indeed the very essence of Tantra. So she's asking, having learned all this stuff, what more is there to discover? What really are all these labels and concepts pointing to? And he says, Sadhu, sadhu, yay! Sadhu just means bravo, bravo, well done, well done. This that you have asked is the very essence of Tantra, oh my beloved. And then he says, Guhaniya tamam, bhadre tathapi katayamite. So this is super secret. But because, oh my beloved, Badre means in the vocative form, oh auspicious one, or oh my wife, although this is supremely secret, the word tatapi means like while this is supremely secret, or even if it's supremely secret, katayami te, so katayami te, I will tell you. So although this stuff is super secret, bye Nanditama, Jaima, although this stuff is super secret, however, I'm going to tell you about it. I'm going to tell you about the forms of the Bhairavas that have been declared by the Tantras. And now Lord Shiva is going to negate everything that was brought up. So he's going to say, Tad asarataya Devī vigyayam shakra jalavat maya swapnopamam chaiva gandharva nagara brahmam. So understand this, O goddess, that all these manifested forms are without essence. They are like Indra's net, which means like magic, or like mere dreams in the sky, or mere dreams, or like castles in the sky, city of fairies in the sky, Gandharva Nagara. So none of them are real. They're not absolutely true. They are spoken of only to help the meditations of those whose intellects are confused. Branta buddhi hinam. Or for those who are busy with ostentatious ritual actions, or for those who are mired in vikalpas. Actually, that Bhairava is not ninefold, nor is it the Shabda Rashi, nor is it the three-headed God, nor is it the triad of powers, nor is it Nada, nor is it Bindu, nor is it Chandrartha, nor Nirodhika, nor divided into the sequence of letters, nor is he even just Shakti, power. Indeed, these are things for those whose intellects are not awakened, like frightening stories told to disciplined children, or like the sweets that your mother gives you to get you to do the right thing. All of the stuff that the Tantras have talked about thus far are only there to help you practice or to encourage some pravritti. Pravritti means attraction for the Tantras. So there will arise inspiration and encouragement. This stuff has been said. But in truth, the ultimate is unspeakable, undefinable, non-locatable, and uncircumscribed by time and space. And so this is such a beautiful idea that like Lord Shiva himself dismisses all those concepts that Bhairavi brought up in the first few verses. And he presents the ultimate reality as unspeakable. So how can it be spoken of in the Tantras? It's undefinable. So what do you make of all the definitions? It's non-locatable. So what about meditating on the heart and here and there? And it's not within time and space. So why do any activities within time and space have anything to do with it? O Bhairavi, anta svanubhavananda vikalpon mukta gochara yavasta baritakara Bhairavi Bhairavatmanaha. This is a good verse to keep with you, to take away with you after today's talk. It's the essence. O Bhairavi, the essence of Bhairava, Bhairavatmanaha, the self of Bhairava, is the Anta Svanubhavananda. So Anubhava means experience. Swa Anubhava. Swa Anubhava Ananda. It is the interior or inner bliss of one's own experience. It is a field free of all conceptual thought, and it is bharitakara, a state. Yad avastha. So it's a state, avastha, of fullness. That's what Bhairava is. And in truth, it's not at all described by the Shabda Rashi, or it's not at all implied by the vowels or the phonemes or anything like that. It's just your very own essence nature. So now the problem is, because of this stuff, everyone dismisses the need to learn this stuff. Like everyone thinks, oh, wait. Shiva said it's not about the Shabda Rashi, therefore I don't have to learn about the Shabda Rashi. Oh, it's not about the nine-headed Bhairava. It's not about the three-headed Bhairava. It's not about the three powers or about Shakti. It's not about Ardha Chandra or Nirodhika or Nada or Bindu. So therefore, why should I equate myself with any of these things? That's what people do when they read the Vijnana Bhairava. They read the first the first 6 verses, and they're like, what the fuck is going on here? I have no idea what these terms mean. But don't worry, I don't have to know what they mean, because after all, Lord Shiva says they're not it. That ain't it, sis. And therefore, I'm freed of my responsibility of learning the stuff. That's like saying, because in university we don't apply the things that we learn in kindergarten or in primary school or in secondary school, we therefore don't need to go to primary school or secondary school. The Vijnana Bhairava is like a PhD level course, and a lot of the things that are said in PhD level physics will contradict what you learned in kindergarten. Kindergarten physics or grade school physics is obviously going to be wrong in the context of PhD physics. When you start using Einsteinian physics, you forget all about your Newtonian physics. They contradict one another. So you can think that this is a sort of Einsteinian or like higher level philosophy and practice that does actually subvert and contradict all the stuff we've been learning up till now, but that doesn't invalidate those things. And so even though Lord Shiva says we don't have to ultimately care about these things, relatively it would be helpful to learn them. It would be really, really helpful to know what the ninefold Bhairava is, or to know what the three-headed Bhairava or the triad of powers, what they represent. And of course, the Shabda Rashi. So I'm going to save all of that for next week. Next week's class will probably be called Advanced Concepts in Tantra. And one by one, I want to go through all of this. So we can make a list now of things that we should know before we enter the Vijnana Bhairava. And they are the following. The Shabda Rashi system. So that's one thing we have to know. The ninefold Bhairava. The three-headed Bhairava. The triad of powers. Nada and Bindu. And I'm going to include this in one category. Nada, Bindu, Ardha Chandra, Nirodhika. They all come together. And you could even say the circle of consciousness or the vowelless mantra is the same. Shakti. And of course, having learned all of these 7 things, now we can enter into verse 7, where Lord Shiva goes beyond all of these things. And you can see in Tantra Loka, book 4, verse 207, the 9 levels of Bhairava are given. Shiva, Shakti, Sadashiva, Ishvara, Shuddha Vidya, Maya, Kala, Kala, Niyati. So 3 Kanchakas as opposed to 5. Maya plus the 5 supernals, all of these make up the ninefold Bhairava. But of course, we have to talk about the 9 ghosts and the 9 apertures, like the 2 eyes, the 2 nose, the mouth, the 2 ears, the anus, the genitals. Count them up, you'll get 9, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Anus and genitals, 8, 9. So these are the 9 gateways through which prana enters and out of which prana flows. Or you can think of the 9 avaranas, or the 9 chakras. So some homework maybe if you want. You can read up on the avaranas, the 9 layers of the Sri Chakra. Maybe a kind of study question that you might be interested in trying to answer is, how do the avaranas relate to the chakras? If you were to take the 9 avaranas of the Sri Chakra, how would you relate them to the chakra system that you might have encountered in the Kubjika system or in Hatha Yoga? How do they match? After all, how do you make them match if there's only 6 chakras or 5 chakras? And if there are 9 chakras, where are the other 2 or 3? These are good questions to ask. So we'll leave that for next week. Maybe we'll call this class Things That You Should Know Before Studying the Vijnana Bhairava, maybe. Because these are things that Devī knows before Shiva gives her instruction. So if we are going to get that instruction from Shiva, we should be at the level of Devī, at least intellectually, if not actually, like we should know these things. So having said that, I want to suggest the Paramartha Sara as a really great place to start. Before we study texts like the Malini Vijayatara Tantra or the Vijnana Bhairava, before we take up the Tantra Loka or even the Tantra Sara, I think the Paramartha Sara of Abhinavagupta is a great introduction. And by now, having studied it together for some time, maybe almost a year, oh my God, has it been 2 years? No, I think a year, right? Maybe 2 years. But having studied it for a year or maybe 2 years, I don't know when we started. But by now, you should probably have a good sense of the 36 tattvas. You should know all about Sankhya, and you should know all about the additional 11 tattvas that Abhinavagupta has revealed thus far in our text. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that for today. Thank you all so very much for coming. It was a nice long 2-hour lecture, longer than I intended it to be. So thank you for your patience. And again, happy birthday, Bhairavi Nikila. Happy birthday, Shani. And if you'd like, we can open for a few Q&A type things now. So thank you all so much. May we all be blessed by the divine descent of power, that we may be interested and inspired to take up the tantras. May we be blessed to have access to the tantras and access to genuine commentaries that elucidate the tantras. May we have access to true teachers, sincere teachers, and true lineages. And above all, may our intellects be purified, that we may receive the teaching and integrate it and live according to it. On this new moon, may all be aflame with awakened consciousness. May all worship the Divine Mother with fervor. May she reveal herself to us now and always. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Bhairavarpanamastu. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Om. Peace, peace, peace.